What's going on, guys? Give me a second. I'm just sharing the link for the stream, and we'll get going. Going live in a minute. I'm just sharing the link for the stream. Trying to get some people in here. Yeah, what's up, guys? Give me 2 seconds. I'm sharing the link to the stream, and I'm gonna get the show rolling. Hang out for a minute. Not gonna be long. Supposedly this interview was a banger. I didn't get to watch it yet, so I figured I'll watch it with you guys. Alright. Shut the music off. Let's get going here. Guys, if you're new to the channel, my name is Ricky. This is America First. FTR stands for Free the Republic, because obviously we are no longer a sovereign nation.
It's such an
aspect
of the people who are telling.
We're gonna watch and break down Tucker's interview with Dave Smith that got released earlier today. I got like 20 minutes into it. It's yeah, it's gonna be a hitter. So we'll watch it, we'll break it down, see what you guys think. I know they'd get into the Trump assassination, Charlie Kirk's murder, the bullet not matching. They get into a lot. So let's get this going. Give me 1 second. That's good. Alright.
So it does seem like, in addition to everything, first of all, Dave, thank you. As always, we're late because we just had such a long breakfast, 2.5-hour breakfast. I hope this conversation could be as interesting as our breakfast just was. But in addition to everything else changing, you made such a smart point a minute ago about the means of convincing the public. The propaganda machine is completely broken. And so what does that mean? You're in the middle of a war. You're in the middle of a massive power shift globally. Like, everything is changing, the economy, military strength, like everything. And it's impossible to know who is telling the truth. Like, who comes out more credible in this, in the media? Like, who are the people you listen to? What's that look like?
Well, I think everybody who's being authentic, I think, is who's coming out ahead of this. It seems like if you look at like the podcast numbers, you know what I mean? Like, it's the people who are being critical of the regime's policies. It's the people, you know, from my perspective, the people who are telling the truth. And so in the media world, I think there's been this, as you know, because you were in the old media world for so long.
Only 35 years.
There you go. Okay, not that long. This a little bit. You put a little bit of time in.
I'm implicated, yes.
But look, I always thought, and I mean this, I used to watch you back on your MSNBC show, and you were always one of the very few kind of authentic people. Even when you were wrong about stuff and things that you look back on and you're like, oh, I've changed my mind about all that. But it's an incredibly phony world. Like news in general, there's something about it that's very, it's very, welcome back to the 6 o'clock news. And, it's just like, what is that? That's not how you talk.
Credibility doesn't derive from being right about everything. Credibility derives from being honest.
Yes. But so I think after the first 20 years or so, first 15 years of the 21st century, and, at this point, we're 26 years into the 21st century now, it's the government, every single crisis that's happened, and we've had quite a few, at 9/11, and we had the global war on terrorism, we had the huge financial crash in 2008, we had COVID, we had that. Okay, so on every single crisis, the government and the media just lied through their teeth to the American people and got exposed. Like, it's not like anyone now thinks, like, maybe Saddam really did have weapons of mass destruction.
Right.
Like, we all know. We all know if you get the vaccine
is safe,
you can get COVID. Turns out you can get COVID even after having the vaccine, as everyone who got the vaccine also got COVID, or just about.
My brother got the vaccine and boosted 3 times, got COVID 5 times. Never got the vax, never got the booster, never got COVID.
And so it was like all these phonies in media lying us on behalf of power, lying to us about these policies. Right. And at the same time, as they were getting exposed for all of this, and I do think COVID did it almost more than anything, because the global war on terrorism was over there, but COVID was over here and affected everyone. Also, obviously, the, covering for a clearly senile president was a pretty easy one for everyone to see through. But so while all that was happening, also the technology, simultaneously got to a point where, you can do this for a reasonable amount of money. You know what I mean? Like, it's not in 1980, if you wanted to set up your own TV studio, you needed a corporation to get behind you, because who had the resources? Whereas everyone now can open their computer. If you have a phone, you can record yourself and put it out there. So the technology allowed for tremendous parody, and the lying us into all of these disasters resulted in people really craving authenticity. Yeah. And so, it's just like the propaganda machine got broken. Now, to your point, the policies are still going on. And that just creates a very interesting new time. Like, there never was, I cannot imagine if, while George W. Bush was trying to, push the war in Iraq, let's say for all of 2002, they spent the full year building the case for what? Well, imagine every day Bill O'Reilly and Sean Hannity were calling out George W. Bush for his lies. Like, the people who George W. Bush voters trusted the most were hearing their favorite newscaster telling the truth, doing news. Well, you can't even fathom what that would be like. Well, that's what it's like now. Now, that's the situation. And I don't know what that means exactly, but I know that governments all around the world have invested heavily in propaganda campaigns for a reason, because they think that's really important. They think it's important that they don't just go invade Iraq, but that they convince you first that he's got nuclear weapons and he's in bed with the terrorists and they're, whatever Condoleezza Rice.
But here's the problem. After COVID, I don't think anybody believes anything they say. So, unless you're part of the cult, you're not buying it. So,
we don't want the warning to be in the form of a mushroom cloud from the bomb that doesn't exist. His terrorist friends who he hates, who he's not friends with at all. But so now we're in this new world, and it's very exciting as someone who's a part of it, and it's an exciting moment to be alive, but it is certainly a dangerous one. You know, they say the most dangerous time for a woman to leave the most dangerous time for an abused woman is when she tries to leave.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's when he might kill you. And that's kind of how I feel about the government right now.
I think that's so, first of all, so well put, and also so true, because it can't actually last that much longer because the disparity in power is too great. So I think a lot of people who have podcasts, I've been in so many different kinds of media, it's hard to remember what this one's called. What's podcasting? It's the same, you know.
Sure. It's a kind of silly term that doesn't really make sense.
It doesn't.
We don't have iPods anymore.
No.
I don't know why. It just that one just stuck for whatever reason.
It's so true. But people who have, you know, in independent media feel like they have a lot of power. Oh, I've got so much power. They have no power. They don't control the medium, really. They don't control YouTube.
Yeah.
They don't have the FBI at their disposal. They don't have nuclear weapons. So actually, they are powerless. And through a quirk of history, because we're in a change moment, that's not obvious, but it has to be obvious. There's too much at stake, right?
Yeah, there was a...
Don't they have to be crushed?
I think it was the CNN lady. She used to work for Vice, I believe, but the girl who was like known for interviewing like the alt-right figures, and she interviewed Tim Dillon last year, and it was right after Trump won his election, or shortly after, and she said, you know, something like, you guys are the real the power center now, you know. And she's like, yeah, you podcasters, you guys are the ones with power, because I guess, well, okay, more people watch these shows than watch the traditional shows,
right? And
Trump came and did a bunch of them, and then he won re-election, and Kamala Harris was too scared for wisely. People say that was a real mistake. She should have done Rogan. No, it wasn't. It was a really good call. It was a really, really good call by her team to not do Rogan, actually. It's like after 2016 when they were like, what, you know, Hillary Clinton's campaign is so stupid. She didn't visit Wisconsin more. And you're like, you really think they're that stupid? No, her numbers went down every time she went. Exactly. So they're like, stop going.
They didn't like her. That's why she didn't go.
It was actually her best chance was that. But anyway, so you know, they say, oh, you guys, you know, since you guys got President Trump elected, you're the real power center now. And it's like, pretty sure the CIA still has a little bit of power. I think there's still like a little bit hanging on in the Pentagon. I'm not quite sure. It's all in Theo Vaughn's hands at this point, you know?
That's right.
But no, yes, so that's the dynamic.
So it can't continue. I mean, let's be totally honest. If what everyone forgets about Tank Man and Tiananmen Square is like, we don't even know what happened to him. We don't know his name. Probably crushed by the tank, actually.
Almost certainly, yes.
I'm not laughing. I am laughing because just the delusion that people have. I've got a voice. It's like, no.
Well, but that's the weird, it's very strange for both these things to be going.
We do have voices, though. Charlie Kirk had a voice, and they killed him for using it.
On at the same time. That's why I said to you at breakfast, my analogy is on the Roadrunner cartoons when you run off the side of the cliff, but you're still in air for a moment, and then you look down and realize, it's like we're there. Like, how can you keep doing this? So those people, I mean, and you know, obviously for me personally, like, it's kind of fascinating because I've been in this world, and over the last 2.5 years or so, I've done, I mean, like, if you count like all the, you know, debates and the Pierce Morgan debates or Oxford style debate, I've done like 35, 40 debates on, you know, just Israel or the warfare state or whatever it is, Ukraine, a lot of these things. And I've never, it's like the side, broadly speaking, because there's a lot of differences amongst people who disagree with, say, the war in Iran, or U.S. support for Israel destroying Gaza. But broadly speaking, it's not only like we've won the debate, we've like just crushed the, you know, and it's not just me, there's lots of people involved in this, you more so probably than anyone. But when you see, like, if you look at the polls, there was this one poll I saw, and this is just one poll, but there's a lot that back this up, but that it was before October 7th, they'd ask, who do you sympathize with more, the Israelis or the Palestinians? And it was plus 48 for the Israelis.
Yeah.
It's now plus 1 for the Palestinians. And
in the U.S.
In the U.S. And to just think, so basically a 50-point shift in a little over 2 years. And Tucker, I mean, I don't know, you were doing this for longer than me. when does that ever happen? When does any issue ever swing by 50 points in 2 years?
It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. That is how fast Israel has turned public sentiment against them for what they did in Gaza. And Charlie Kirk found out the hard way. It's indefensible what they're doing. And he told them that, and they didn't like that answer. They wanted him to toe the line. So, away went Charlie.
Like if I were to tell you in 2 years this country would be 95% pro-life, you'd be like, it's like, whoa, what happened in those 2 years? Yeah. Well, I mean, the pro-lifers must have really won the argument. You know what I mean? Like, and so now that we've had, for the first time ever, a media environment where, say, Israel is not completely protected. Like, what were the debates about supporting Israel on MSNBC or CNN? No, they don't exist. They never happen. You're not allowed to have those debates there. There's not, maybe like one kind of critical of Israel host will slip in here or there, but if he says too much, he's getting fired pretty quickly. And so we essentially won the debate. It's not close. It's not.
But
there's not a question of
fast.
Yes, in a very short period of time, because there was actually a fair, open media system now, where it was really democratized in a way, and so you can't look and go, you're bigger than you've ever been before. Candace Owens is bigger than she's ever been before. I know I'm bigger than I've ever been before. Ben Shapiro is weaker and more of a laughing stock than ever before. It's just very But then, at the same time, who won the policy game? Mark Levin. The president is tweeting, go watch Mark Levin's show today.
The donors won. That's who won. The Zionist donors won. Their money won. That's who won.
And his base, his voters are going, I think I'll check out Tucker Carlson. I think I'll. And so anyway, there's just this very weird thing where, like, we won the argument. We had the national debate. We won. And yet we're at war with Iran on behalf of Israel. And I think what you're getting at is, like, that does just feel totally unsustainable. Like, there's either you got to clamp down on these guys like us, or you got to reverse the policy. And really hoping it's the latter.
So the weather is warming, which means grilling is here, and you're probably already...
Here's the problem with reversing the policy. So many politicians are dual citizens of Israel and the United States that unless we ban dual citizens serving for national public office, we will continue to run into this problem. So if you are a dual citizen, you should not be able to hold a national public seat in our country, because your loyalty should be to America and America only. It's pretty simple.
Something. And the consequences are very, very serious. In the middle of that, to criticize the decision to start the process that led to this, it feels like you're going to be punished for that.
Yeah.
Do you feel that?
Yes, I know exactly what you mean. And I almost, like, on some, I don't know, in some way I feel like the political thing or the wise calculation here would almost be to be like, Mr. President Trump, you did such a phenomenal job with this, and it's such a success that we should just stop right now and declare victory or something, like, you know what I mean? But I'm just no good at being a political operative. I'm only good at telling the truth. Like, it's all I only have one speed. Ben Shapiro called me out recently and called me a bunch of names, and then she said, I know, I can hear Dave right now saying, debate me, bro. Like, if you believe this, why don't you debate me? And he goes, no, I don't debate with it. But he's kind of right in a way that is my response.
Of course.
I mean, I only have one speed. It's all I know how to do. Like, come podcast with me. Like, I don't know anything else. So,
well, because you're rooted in kind of the old America where, there was a free market, not just in the economy, but like intellectually, free market of ideas.
yeah, we're supposed to have it at least.
That the whole country was built on that.
Yeah,
idea.
and so that is
Ben Shapiro and et cetera, they don't share that view at all.
He knows the ideas can't hold up. I mean, he'll debate a 19-year-old gender confused kid because he knows he can win that debate.
Yeah.
It's not that kid's more serious than me. That's not really the issue. But anyway, I guess. So just that, like, I only have one speed. I only know how to just tell you what I think is really going on here, and I think you're right. I think this is such a disaster because Donald Trump, first of all, it'd be very difficult at this point, even if he wanted to just stop the thing, which I think he does at this point, want to stop the thing. I think it seems to me like he believed this could be quick and easy like Venezuela, and we're way past that at this point. But he can't just stop now. Well, obviously, there's the Iranians and the Israelis are involved in this too, and it doesn't seem like either of them want to stop right now. No. So there you got a big problem. But also, look, this isn't Venezuela. There's I don't know what the latest.
Oh, I don't know if you guys saw the news today, but Israel has annexed, taken, and claimed southern Lebanon, and it will now permanently be within Israel's borders. So, if you have any confusion about what this war is about, that's what it's about. It's about expanding Israel's borders.
CENTCOM numbers are, I thought 13 dead Americans was the last I saw. The 150 plus wounded number came out weeks ago. I don't know what that's up to now. Our bases and in the region have been very badly damaged. The damage to the global economy is so it's not Venezuela. You can't just come out of this and then pretend something really great happened. If he stops right now, then it's like, oh, you just started a disaster for no reason on behalf of a foreign country. Like, this is just awful. And then there's a couple factors. I've seen this play. I know you've seen this over the years, certainly during the global war on terrorism, where there is, I guess, what you could call like the sunk cost fallacy of war, which is the worst of all sunk cost fallacies. But it's you go, well, those boys died for nothing if we don't finish the job. And it's like, oh, man, is that a bad trap to get into? Because the reality is that those boys died for nothing.
Yep.
That's over. And if you continue this, more boys will die for nothing.
That's correct.
And so no one, Pierce Morgan had a panel once, or a debate between Scott Horton, who is as you've had him on the show, the most incredible foreign policy guy in the country, like just unbelievable levels of brilliance. And his books, Enough Already, Fool's Errand, which are about the global war on terrorism, are the best books written on the subject. His book Provoked about the war in Ukraine is the best book written on the subject.
They're literally exhaustive. I only know Scott Horton because of you and what improvement to my life.
Yeah, I mean, he has been such an incredible resource. Like, he's a great friend of mine. One of my closest friends, but he's also he's like my mentor in the foreign policy stuff. And he's just so great because he's such a tool because he's got a photographic memory. So like I can literally just call him at any point and you'll just be like, when Iran invaded Iraq in 1980, in 1982, weren't they fighting here? And then he'll just be like, yeah, they were fighting here and here. And then this guy has all their names and everything. It's really incredible. But so he was debating Wesley Clark on Pierce Morgan's show. Talk about the new media world that we live in and how crazy it is now that Scott Horton gets to square off with a 4-star general. And Wesley Clark, who, look, I have my issues with him, but he did give us that great admission about the 7 countries in 5 years. So I'll always kind of be grateful to him. Now he tries to walk that back, but we all heard what you said. But he goes at one point
we did.
Talking about, I believe it was Gaza, if I'm getting this correct. He said this was while it was still, intensely going on. And he goes, but if we just leave now, then Hamas gets to say they won. And you're like, sir, general, that's your opinion on war? Yeah. But that's a recipe to be in forever war always. We can't ever leave anywhere so what happens is you get this thing where it's like there's the sunk cost fallacy. We can't leave now because we have to win. And then Donald Trump is now, of course, he put his entire presidency on the line for this, which was really foolish. And so now he's got to get a win. Let me get a win, and then I can get out, you know? So let's do a big thing. But then you do a big thing, and they respond with a big thing. And then you go, shoot, now we got to respond to that thing. And this is the escalation trap, right? Like that. And this was what people like me and you have been talking about for years. And all the war hawks in the country really enjoyed mocking me and you for the last 7 months or whatever it's been from between the 12-day war and this latest war in Iran, going, oh, you guys were acting like this was going to be a disaster. And look, it wasn't a disaster. Okay, we're back in it now, and it's a disaster. And precisely 0 of those people are going, oh, I guess I was wrong about that.
No, they'll be clamoring for you to be arrested and imprisoned.
Yeah.
Of course, right. Because your existence is a mark of shame because you remember, right?
Yeah.
So anyone who remembers has to be taken off the board. I'm just interested. I never think about, those people. The Mark Levin. I say a prayer for Mark Levin every day because it's my religion. I'm supposed to, but he's not. I mean, Mark Levin's an idiot. He's not pulling any strings. He's a tool of larger forces
Yes.
here. What I'm fascinated by are the assumptions that like ordinary non-Mark Levin Americans have about the United States, the nature of power, history, that allowed us to make the greatest mistake of my lifetime, which is this war. What are those? And a lot of this has to do with the Second World War.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So we're reading the wrong lessons into that. And I just want to say for the 100th time, I'm the opposite of pro-Nazi. I'm against authoritarianism in all its forms. But why is it that we look at the Second World War and then make a bunch of false assumptions that get us into engagements like this that hurt us?
Well,
what is that? What are the myths?
Well, I think the way I look at it, right, and this is, I've defended Daryl Cooper quite publicly, quite often for what he said on your show, which really, it was, by the way, it's so revealing and totally proves his point, the response to that. Because there's just no reason why that should have been such a huge thing, but like, the thing is that
Hey, Daryl Cooper, did Hitler kill a lot of Jews? Yeah, he did. He did like hours of podcasts on it.
Yes.
Of course Hitler killed a lot of Jews. I mean, what? That's not even
He just put out episode 2 of his new series on World War II, which I have not. I heard the first one. I've not gotten a chance to listen to the second one yet. The first one's so good. They're all so good.
It's not really about that. I don't think any sane person, I've never heard anybody in my life say Hitler didn't kill a ton of Jews or Hitler loved the Jews. No, Hitler hated the Jews, killed a ton of Jews. That's bad. Everyone agrees with that. It's not really the Holocaust that they're mad about. That's not
Well, look, I mean,
the threat.
Right.
So most people don't wake up in the morning and decide to feel horrible, exhausted, foggy, disconnected from themselves.
Hold on.
But it does happen.
So World War II was, objectively speaking, the worst thing that's ever happened in the world.
Yes.
Right? It was the biggest bloodbath in human history.
Exactly.
And destroyed Europe it's just so, it's so horrible you think about that humanity reached such a height in the 19th century. The 19th century, there's 2 things that happened that could not have been predicted. You would have seemed insane if you had predicted it beforehand. Probably the 2 greatest achievements in human history are that, there's the Industrial Revolution, and for the first time ever, there's economic growth. If you look at economic growth on a chart, it basically doesn't exist until the Industrial Revolution, and then it shoots up.
There's just different apportionments of wealth.
Yes. So for the first time ever, human beings escaped the back-breaking poverty of nature. You know what I mean?
They escaped zero-sum economics.
Yes, zero-sum economics, but just
where people got rich by looting. Now you can get rich by creating things that didn't exist before.
And we could raise the standard of living in a meaningful way, in very basic, ways. And also there was the abolition of slavery, which just would have seemed like that was the way of the world for all of human history. And I'm saying the abolition of slavery in the West. Obviously, there were other parts of the world that still had it.
Yeah.
But, and the Industrial Revolution was in the West also. So, but these amazing things happen. And then in the 20th century, we take that industrial capacity to go to total war with each other And in the case of the First World War, just over nonsense. I mean, over a political assassination.
It's not even clear.
Yeah, it's not like somehow this thing spins into this catastrophe. But so after World War II, that's even bloodier than World War I, which was supposed to be the war to end all wars. And it wasn't. It was the war to create the conditions for the worst war in human history. And of course, as you've talked about and gotten a lot of heat for, civilians were targeted on all sides. Now, of course, we didn't go genocidal in the way that Adolf Hitler went, but we targeted cities when we knew the military was out, targeting women and children, dropping nuclear bombs on cities. And so, and also the kind of the military industrial complex, the national security apparatus were truly created in the aftermath of World War II. Like there were intelligence, but the CIA is created, and the form of government that we actually live under was kind of erected during and after World War II. And so you've got the most profoundly awful thing that's ever happened, and this new government plus a new government in Israel a couple years later that are created. And so when you have something like that, you really got to tell yourself a damn good story about why that is justified. And that's not, when you say this, sometimes people go, oh, so are you saying the Holocaust didn't really happen? It's like, no, it really happened.
It's not about
it really
the
happened.
Holocaust.
The point is that, yes, the point is that the Holocaust happened in a context of 60 million people dying. You know what I mean? Like
it's just so funny. It's all reduced to the, okay, just to be totally clear, not denying the Holocaust. Okay. It's not about that. Yeah. The immediate post-war changes that you just listed, the deindustrialization of the West, the partition of India, the creation of the national security state, if I could say, an authoritarian national security state in the West, delivering half of Europe to the Soviets, the partition of Germany, like these are all the genocide of German civilians after the war, mass
ethnic cleansing, mass rapes and murders, and all types of horrible stuff.
So it's not a defense of Hitler, whom I oppose, to say all of those are bad. It's just kind of interesting that this war, which was supposedly so great, gave birth to things that are just objectively the worst things.
And
what is that?
Well, look, I mean, it's a disaster of government, total power.
Guys, if you're new to the channel, real quick, my name's Ricky. This is America First FTR. Stands for Free the Republic, because we are obviously no longer a sovereign nation. Share the stream, drop a comment, let me know where you're watching from, help me break into the algorithm, anything. I would appreciate it.
And but look, even if you say if you're talking about the Revolutionary War, let's just say back in the 1980s or something, it's a school teacher's teaching kids about the Revolutionary War. They don't go well, the King of England was taxing a little bit more than he should. And then the framers kind of had these wild conspiracy theories about what he was going to come do. None of that was really true. And anyway, they got into they tell you George Washington never told a lie. And when he chopped down the apple tree, he said to his pa, I can't lie to you. Because human beings just need this narrative.
Of course.
That makes. And so what ended up happening was that when you challenge World War II orthodoxies, you're challenging what Darrell calls the load-bearing myths, the load-bearing pillars of the existence of the most powerful forces in the world. And, look, it's very clear. Again, the reaction to Darrell is the proof of the claim. What is this? If somebody were to say, this is how you find out what the national religion really is. I could sit here and trash Thomas Jefferson for raping his slaves.
Doesn't matter what you say.
It doesn't matter. This isn't going to generate any outrage at all. In fact, it might generate some applause from in different quarters. And so, but you talk about this, and it's very, very different. And then, as we've all seen, it's used to justify every subsequent war.
Yep.
I mean, everybody is
to
Hitler.
justify authoritarianism.
Yeah, that's right. Yep. Everybody is Adolf Hitler. I've lived through it's
Gaddafi.
Saddam Hussein was Adolf Hitler. Noriega was Adolf Hitler. Bashar al-Assad is Adolf Hitler. Vladimir Putin's Adolf Hitler. You're Adolf Hitler. Nick Fuentes is Adolf Hitler. every time they want to smear someone, that's the smear they go with. Donald Trump got the same treatment.
Hitler had aura.
And anytime you oppose a war, well, you're Neville Chamberlain. You know, if I think like, hey, we should just put in writing that we'll never bring Ukraine into NATO because, man, this is causing all these problems. Okay, Neville Chamberlain, you would have just given Czechoslovakia. It's like, dude, that's not the only lesson in history. The only lesson in history is not always go with aggression, never go with de-escalation. But so that's kind of what this has been turned into. And I do think...
But I would just say, big picture, if it was such a victory, why are all the winners falling apart less than 100 years later?
Yeah, that's a fair point.
Again, shut up, you're pro-Hitler for the 5th time. Not pro-Hitler in any sense.
Yeah. Well, no,
but like, what's the answer to that question?
Well, there's a brilliant philosopher named Rosie Perez. And in the film White Men Can't Jump, she said, sometimes when you win, you really lose.
Yeah.
And
that
you know,
it
is such a simple but very, very true statement. And there is something about, well, isn't it kind of interesting that the United States of America...
Dave Smith quoting Rosie from White Men Can't Jump. It's fucking epic, by the way.
Started as the experiment in restrained government. Right? Like there had really never been a government that was created that was so restrained. And the whole idea of it was like, we're going to take the power of a king and then we're going to scatter that amongst 3 different branches in the federal government. And the federal government really only oversees all these state governments that have their own autonomy. And we are these United States of America. And even as we became more centralized, obviously the Articles of Confederation got overthrown and the Constitution gets put in. And then, you know, but even say, like, if you look after this, from the end of the Civil War, this was always the best stuff about, like, Milton Friedman books and stuff. But in this part, I really think those Chicago guys got it right. That if you look from the end of the Civil War, so like 1865 to around, say, 1910, okay? In this period of time, try to imagine that this was our government, okay? The U.S. government, the federal government spent, like, maybe like 1.5% or 2% of the national income, a tiny amount of spend. There was no mass federal regulation or anything like that. There was no central bank. There was no income tax. And just try to imagine, like, this was truly the closest to a real experiment in free market capitalism that humanity had ever seen. And the result of that was the biggest economic expansion in human history, the greatest raising of the lot and life of the average person, you know, like where the average person could actually have a pretty nice life and you could work at the factory and your wife didn't have to work and you owned a house and you sent your kids to college and you drove a couple cars, you played poker on the weekends with your buddy, like you had a good life. And if you look at the United States of America today, it is the most powerful government in the history of the world.
Yep.
Like somehow this thing that started as an experiment in the smallest government became the biggest government that the world's ever known. And so there's almost something where, well, what happens is these free markets create so much prosperity that there's so much more of a tax base. And now the political class can tax you more and more and more, and you're still living a pretty good life, even though they're getting fat off of you. You know what I mean? And so similarly, sometimes something like after World War II, you see this with America, and then you really see it after the collapse of the Soviet Union, where it's like, because you win, you get so much power. But as Lord Atkins said, that power tends to corrupt. And so you get all this power, but then it totally corrupts your own soul. And I think that's kind of the story of America.
And I think it's the story of our lives. I mean, the number of men I know who've gotten what they wanted, what they worked for, the job, the exit, you know, the sale of whatever they built, all of a sudden they win and then they fall apart. I've seen that so much. I felt it in my own life, by the way, for sure. You know, easy success is not good for you at all. Struggle is good for you. And so I wonder if the United States was hollowed out by its own victory, this loss, and unfortunately I think
the United States was hollowed out by the Federal Reserve, senators and congressmen that are serving for decades and only getting richer, and the separation of the political class from the middle class because those people have no idea what it's like to struggle.
We can say already, it's hard to imagine getting out of this without being diminished.
Yeah, I mean, what is a victory here?
Right.
I mean, you know, it's also a terrible situation where victory might be the worst case scenario. I mean, like, you know, like victory, like if the whole goal is to topple the regime, you're like, okay, but every other time we've toppled the regime in this neck of the woods, it's led to migrant crises and death and terrorism.
You can't topple a regime in the Persian Gulf because the world's energy supply needs to move through it. You have to extract it, refine it, make it into petrochemicals, do whatever you fertilizer, do whatever you want in the Persian Gulf, and then you have to get it out of the Persian Gulf. So that means you have to have a controlling authority. You have to have strong governments there, or else some rebel group, Houthis with drones, will shut the whole thing down. You have to have. You can't have chaos in Iran.
Yeah, they call it the Persian Gulf for a reason.
Exactly. Even if you call it the Arabian Gulf, the other half is Persian. It doesn't matter. Chaos in the Persian Gulf means no energy or fertilizer from the Persian Gulf, period. So you're going to piracy there. So the option to that is keeping an Iranian regime in place, and that means that Iran is more powerful than it was when the war started.
Right.
We have lifted sanctions on Iranian oil. We have lifted sanctions on Russian oil. The Iranian regime is now settling all their transactions in Chinese yen. So who's really making out right now? Because it's not our economy.
This is also obvious, unless you nuke them, which is, I think, an option. And then you set off a chain reaction that, you know.
And that's exactly what's going to happen. Israel is going to nuke them. That is how this conflict is either going to end or start World War III. But either way, I am 100% calling that Israel is going to nuke Iran.
Is the worst thing imaginable.
Inflation makes credit card statements particularly scary. You work 40, 50 hours a week.
To get bad so that people wake up even more. There's no question people have woken up a lot, but maybe people just need to get angrier, you know, and I don't know. I don't know what
I'm trying to see this in the fullness
is.
of history and God's plan, but I just, because it feels like such a disaster, it's affecting my sleep. I love America. I have kids. I don't want this to happen. I'm not in control, obviously. So, but I do think that, like, you're often surprised by the downstream results of things. I think people who return from Normandy would be shocked by the condition of the United States and Great Britain 80 years later. They are shocked. Whenever you see them interviewed, some 100-year-old guys like, we died for this?
Yeah. No, it's and it's totally, I mean, like, talk about just disgracing their sacrifice, you know.
It's the greatest disgrace.
Yeah.
Our self-abasement is an insult to their sacrifice on our behalf. But I wonder if the opposite isn't also true, that maybe in your defeat there are things that, I mean, I know this is true for me. Every time I've gotten sick or gotten fired, like I understand the world better and I become more joyful and stronger. Do you feel that?
Yeah, no, I know for sure. I mean, many times in my life, and yeah, you learn a lot more from your losses.
Yeah, your defeats are actually your victories in retrospect.
Right. That's right. But the problem is just we're just playing with fire with this thing because it's so dangerous. You know, it's
What worries you most?
Well, I guess I'd say number one, what we're doing to those people over there, I mean, I think is just like horrible. And I don't say this as like, I'm not trying to like virtue signal that I care so much more than other people, but like when your government takes your money and just starts slaughtering people in poor countries compared to us, you know, it's just so profoundly
What you
wrong.
do to others will be done to you.
Yeah,
that's a physics principle. You can't get away from that. So that's just true.
Well, imagine
around,
like
around.
there was a guy.
In the words of Lil Wayne, karma is like a hula hoop. Goes around, comes around.
Guy who was like a convicted pedophile, and he had molested a bunch of like Iraqi children or a bunch of Iranian children, and then you were like, well, I'm gonna have him babysit my kids. He only does it over there. You know what I mean? Like, you're like, what? No, dude, he's hurt children. You can't let him anywhere near your children.
Right.
Okay, well, these same monsters in government are the ones who are ruling over me and my family and my country.
Right.
And the idea that you just go kill, like, you know, I know I said this on Rogan's show the other day about the school that we hit, where he killed like 165 or 170 little girls, and then people, you know, give me shit. Those numbers haven't been verified. That's just the claim of the Iranian government. He goes, well, our government's not denying it. And in fact, they did an investigation and concluded it was almost certainly us. It was a Tomahawk missile. What's the question here? We know where this came from. The only question left is like, who gave it that coordinates, or did it miss, or was that intentional, whatever. But like, kill a whole bunch of 8-year-old girls? I mean, Jesus, man, is there anything more evil you could do than that? So just on a basic human level, you know, there's like, this
Anyone
is horrible.
who would do that, I think it was clearly accidental, but I also think, having done a lot of accidental things, it's essential to apologize for it.
Yeah.
And anyone who doesn't apologize for it's a dangerous person.
Well, also,
Unless the intelligence came from our greatest ally and it was intentional. Because we know they like to do that.
If you'll do that to them, you'll do it to my kids.
Yes, and it also, it stretches the definition of accidental a little bit, because even if very specifically, like, we were trying to hit this building, but instead we hit this building, and there's a point I've been making largely through the Israel's destruction of Gaza, which was not that at all. They were just leveling the place. Yeah. But you go, look, man, like, you start dropping bombs on people, you start blowing things up, and you know innocent people are going to end up dying in that. So in that sense, it is intentional. And maybe you didn't mean to hit that exact, you know, target or kill that many people. But like, I'm just saying, if you blew up a building, you know, that you suspected somebody else was in, but then it turned out that there were a bunch of little kids there, it's still a pretty profound crime. But then, of course, on top of that, I really worry about getting trapped into a broader war, a wider war. There is not, I'm not saying that I think this is going to be like Iraq or Afghanistan. I think already this is very different than Iraq and Afghanistan.
Guys, drop a like, a comment, share, subscribe. Anything to help me break into the algorithm. I would really, really, really appreciate it.
Afghanistan. Iraq and Afghanistan did not have the ability to do what Iran is doing right now, for one. Number two, I don't think it's going to be that. I think it would be more the Libya or Syria model than the Iraq or Afghanistan model, which did require a small amount of ground forces. So we used head chopping bin Ladenites in both of those cases, and put the bin Ladenites in power in Syria. But just to be clear, our country would not survive another Iraq or Afghanistan.
Nope.
There's no United States of America coming out of that. We don't have a 20-year catastrophic ground invasion in us. Like, it will bankrupt the country. It will destroy the country culturally. So that's a very scary thing. We don't have, you know, in the launch of the global war on terrorism, we were coming out of the 1990s. This was a different country in the 1990s, you know, and anyone who was alive then knows this.
Different people lived here.
Yes, different people, different culture, different economic realities, different military realities. Now, then the other thing that I really, really worry about with all of this is that we've never dealt with a full, like, Shiite jihad war against the West. Nope. You know, our beef was always with the Sunni radicals. Those were the terrorists we had to worry about, the Al-Qaeda and ISIS and stuff like that. And that was quite a big problem. You know, we had a lot of terrorist attacks in America and in Europe, particularly ISIS-inspired attacks, Al-Qaeda as well. And, you know, so I've kind of called out some of these people. I'll do it again here because they're like some of the biggest frauds in the country, these like pretend intellectuals like Sam Harris and Gad Saad and guys like this who have spent a career demonizing Muslims. Their entire career has been talking about what irrational, violent people Muslims are, how awful the religion is. And you know, and look, there's been some points that I agree with them on, you know.
And whether they're atheist or not, the one thing they have in common is they are all the religion of our greatest ally. That's what's stoking the divide between Christians and Muslims.
If someone, writes a cartoon about Muhammad, you don't have the right to kill them. Sorry.
Right.
You want to be in the West. These are our rules here.
Exactly.
We value free speech, and I can make a cartoon about whatever the hell I want to make a cartoon about. Okay, but if you spent your whole career arguing how violent and irrational the Muslims are, what does killing an Ayatollah mean? That's not just a political figure. You murder an Ayatollah and his entire family, and we've already had a couple terrorist attacks over here that at least...
Like killing the Catholic Pope. How do you think the Catholics would react if Muslims killed the Pope? Think about it. We killed their Pope. Whether you agree with their religion or not, there's going to be repercussions for that.
Seem like there was the shooting in Austin, Texas, that came like the day after we launched the war, and the guy was wearing like an Allah Akbar t-shirt. I'm assuming that might be related. And so, then you have this real issue of like, there's unfortunately in the old like controlled American media and all the all the people like Mark Levin and all these guys, when they talk to their audience, whatever audience they got left, and they always love to talk about how Iran chants death to America, which they do. And I'd like it if they stopped doing that. It's not the nicest chant. But none of them ever even try to even approach the question of why.
Yeah.
Why do they chant death to America? Why do they hate us so much? And
they hate us because we fund and support Israel. That's why they hate us.
This was
they
always
hate us for our freedoms.
Yes, right.
So the older you get, you realize how fast everything can change. One day everything is fine, it's great, and the next day things are not great.
Freedoms.
They hate it. When 9/11 happened, the average Joe Six-Pack American went, "Why do they hate us?" That's how ignorant we were of our own position in the world. We didn't even know there was a beef. You go, what are we talking? We thought Bill Clinton was the time of peace and prosperity. That's what Americans considered that time, the time of peace. Iraqis did not consider that a time of peace. Hundreds of thousands of them were getting killed due to the blockade, Clinton's bombing campaign. It wasn't peace in Serbia. You know what I mean? It wasn't like there, but to us, it was like, oh, no, those were little wars. They didn't really mean anything, but it wasn't. Now, all you got to do is ask that question. And I'm sure it's almost like implicit in the Mark Levin world that, well, why do they hate us? Well, I don't know, because they're crazy Durka people and they hate us.
Yeah.
They're Islamo-fascists. I don't know. That's what they do. They hate. But if you ask Iranians, and not the ones who are, paid by Mossad to promote wars, but like they'll tell you very quickly why they hate us. And the whole beef, right, goes back to 1953.
Yep.
We overthrew their government. We
Yep.
installed a dictator who they did not like very much, who was
Yep.
not very kind to his political opponents, to put it mildly. And then the other big thing that they point out all the time
is in
support
1980,
Israel. Saddam Hussein invaded Iraq. Now, a lot of people from my generation remember this because this is actually what the neocons would often like vaguely cite this when they were trying to push the war against Iraq. They're like, he used chemical weapons against civilians. You're like,
no, he didn't.
Yeah. What they leave out is that they were backing him when he did that. They facilitated the sale of those chemical weapons to him, and they backed and gave the green light for Saddam Hussein to invade the country. And so, Iranians remember that. Like, they remember that. There was, I think, 500 or 600,000 Iranians died in that war. Like, they remember this very well. By the way, another lesson from that war is they never surrendered. Even after taking losses like that, these Shiites are not playing around when it comes to matters like that. No. They fought and fought and fought. And so, anyway, I say all that just to say that it's like these things do inspire hatred, and they inspire hatred for generations and generations.
Cause and effect is real?
Yeah, it turns out.
In 2002, a letter emerged written by Osama bin Laden, who of course was then still alive, that he had written right after 9/11 in Kandahar before he fled to Tora Bora, and it came out a year later in the Wall Street Journal, and I worked at CNN at the time, and I read it on the air to answer that question. What is this about? Why did he do this? And the letter, which briefly became famous before it was pulled off the internet, said, I'm mad that you have troops in Saudi, where Mecca and Medina are, and I'm mad about your support for Israel, and that's why I did this.
Yep.
I wasn't trying to justify 9/11. It can't be justified, in my opinion.
That's right.
But I think it's important to know why things happen, because you don't want them to happen again.
Yep.
Well, a group of rabbis got together and called me an anti-Semite, which I wasn't then and I'm not now, and tried to get me fired from my job. I'll never forget that. And CNN called me, the lawyer called me, where they're all mad at you. And I'm like, I wasn't attacking anybody, of course.
Yeah.
I just think it's more than Americans don't know. I think they've been prevented from knowing.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's right.
That, actions have reactions.
Well, that's why, the term blowback that was coined by the CIA and what they described it as was, it's not just like we do a thing and then there's a reaction to it. It's that we do a covert thing and then there's a reaction to it. And then the American people have no idea what this is even in response to. Right. It's just like, whoa, out of nowhere, these guys attacked us. And, when that...
But we're going to need a police state to protect ourselves from the blowback of this war.
I mean, that's a real concern.
That's the problem.
Yeah, that's a real concern.
We're so vulnerable. I mean, this country's wide open.
And
all of our infrastructure, our energy infrastructure, our food, our water, all of it's unguarded. And the only way to protect ourselves from the inevitable blowback, the Shia terrorism that we're going to get, of course, after killing their Ayatollah, is going to be to turn this into a surveillance state even more than it is.
Yeah, and of course, also on top of that, coming off of the Biden years where we don't even know who's here. We have no, it's just the mix of these policies, like the mix of having forever wars.
Joe Kent said in his interview with Sean Ryan that the more they investigated the border crisis, the worse he realized it really was. And they have absolutely no idea who the fuck is in our country and who they are affiliated to. And the estimates are at 20 million over the 4 years. There's some people here that legitimately want to do some damage. And I'm sure they're going to. And we allowed it to happen.
And open borders is just got to be the
and a welfare state.
Yeah, and just throw everything in, and a drug war on top of that too, and a drug war so that drugs are illegal. There's a black market. The gangs want to smuggle the drugs in. Like every single policy on top of it just makes this situation so much worse. But yeah, when the Osama bin Laden's letter to America went viral on TikTok before it was
many years later.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
After my aborted attempt to bring it to the country.
Yes. To be clear, this is written in 2002. It was a couple years ago when it went super viral on TikTok, and all the young leftists were sharing it, and they were going oh my God, look at this. Turns out now, of course, they're leftists, so they always think too collectively, right? And so I saw a bunch of people going, turns out he was right. Or he was the good guy. And you're like, no. That is not the takeaway from this. There was that one time, the guy, Hassan Piker, who's a lefty, a streamer. And he had said that America deserved 9/11. And that was what got him in a lot of trouble for it. And it's but no, stop speaking like a leftist. We're not collectively, we're individuals. And the individuals who had nothing to do with these policies did not have it coming.
Having breakfast at Windows on the World and get killed?
Yeah,
How do you deserve it?
No, you don't do the whole point. Now, what Osama bin Laden said, I don't think this was in the letter to America. I think it was it might have been, it was either that or in his declaration of war. He had 2 declarations of war against America also. But what he said is that civilians are fair game because you vote for, you vote the Bill Clintons and the George Bushes in who slaughter all of our children. And so you're fair game. Now, that's the logic of Osama bin Laden, the psychopathic, terrorist.
Exactly.
And the whole point of why we're against all this shit is because we reject that. We don't agree with that. That's not. And you know who else used that same logic? every goddamn Zionist who said they elected Hamas in Gaza. Oh, by the way, they don't even have regular elections in Gaza. They had one election 20 years ago where Hamas won with pluralities. But that was enough for them to say,
to kill their kids in good conscience.
And so no, the whole point is that no, you don't have the right to take vengeance on innocent people. That is the standard of civilization.
I have said that, pretty consistently for the past couple of years, and I thought that was like just a baseline understanding that everyone in America knew and believed. I thought that was the whole point of America. That's what civilization is. You can't punish the innocent.
Right.
And that turns out to be incredibly anti-Semitic. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
By the way, I've never, up until recently, all the Jews I knew were 100% on board with that. Yeah. I mean, I can just like hear a rabbi going, "You can't kill the innocent." Well, amen, brother.
Except in this one.
But now it's like all of a sudden these people, I don't know. I don't think it's about any specific group. In fact, by definition, it's not. It's a human standard to which we should all be held and do our best to hold others. You can't kill the innocent.
Yeah, and also it's not, it's not about one specific group because...
Well, by definition, it's not about one specific group. It's about all humans.
It's also just not, and this is the problem where when people try to make it about the Jews, and it's so weird, the dynamic, because I watch you literally bend over backward to say that it's not about the Jews as much as possible. To the point, and as someone who's like a Jewish fan of yours, I find myself going like, you could stop making that, but like you've said it enough, you know what I mean? But you do every opportunity. You go, I don't believe in blood guilt.
It's not because I'm afraid of Jews at all.
No, you
or
want to be
anybody.
clear.
I'm not afraid of anybody. It's because I think it's the standard that we have to uphold.
Well, also everyone is insisting that that's what you're really saying, and so you want to go, no, I'm not saying that.
That's why I've been defending Muslims. It's not because I'm Muslim or taking money from Qatar. Too late now. We wrecked their economy. But it's because I think these are human rights bestowed by God, and they apply to every person because they're inherent in every person, because every person is created in the image of God. That's the point I'm trying to make.
And
hey guys, if you're new to the channel, my name's Ricky. This is America First. FTR stands for Free the Republic, because we are obviously no longer a sovereign nation. Subscribe, like, drop a comment. Help me break into the algorithm. Anything to support the channel, I'd appreciate it.
Completely agree with you. I also think it's just frankly inaccurate. I mean, it's not. Look, I saw one poll today that said 60% of American Jews support the war in Iran, which, hey, that's a lot higher than the general population.
Yes,
but that means 40% of them don't. You know what I mean? And so, like, that's a huge, huge percentage of them. I think a third of Jews in New York voted for this Mamdani guy. Now, I'm annoyed with them for other reasons because he's a crazy socialist, but they're clearly not on board with the Israel lobby's plan here. And then, of course, as you've done a better job of exposing than anyone I've ever seen, there's a lot of, like, Ted Cruz's and Mike Huckabee's out there who, as you, I think, correctly pointed out, are different animals, right? Like, Ted Cruz is a cynical, lying politician. Mike Huckabee is like a true believer of sorts. I'm not sure which is worse. They're both pretty rough, and both totally humiliated themselves when you interviewed them. But there's also, like, the point is that the Israel lobby encompasses a lot of non-Jews, and then there's a lot of Jews. There's the Max Blumenthals and Norman Finkelsteins and Glenn Greenwalds, and so it's just to say it's like this group. Now you're missing the point entirely.
Well, I would say that the advocates for the war are primarily responsible for that. And speaking of blowback, I mean, it's hardly my job to like defend Jewish Americans, but I want to defend all Americans, and I definitely want to defend the principle that we should be judged on our own terms, not by people who look like us or we're related to. Like, I think that's the most important thing. But, I mean, I do think you often hear, anti-Semitism is on the rise. I agree with that.
Yeah.
And I wish it wasn't true. But that is absolutely real. And I know that I'm blamed for it. Okay. But I'm against it.
I think you're one of the... Okay,
I'm really against
I know people will mock me for saying this, but I genuinely think it's true. I think you are one of the leading fighters against anti-Semitism. in the country.
I think so.
And I think I do what I can to be that as well.
Yep.
I think if you really want to see a decrease in Jew hatred, then I think maybe it would be good to have Jewish people saying, "Hey, I am totally against this.
Yeah.
I am not for this." But also, it is, and I'm not defending collectivism of any stripe, but it is very predictable, and it is just human nature. You know, if you have
that's why it's so scary.
Yes.
Because it is human nature.
Yeah.
That's exactly
Well,
right.
if there, let's say you just have a neighborhood, okay, there's like a neighborhood, all things being equal or whatever, and a bunch of black teenagers, black young men are going around and mugging and beating up people. Do you think anti-black racism is going to go up, go down, or stay the same?
Crime causes racism.
This is right.
I've said that for years.
Now,
No one knows. Shut up.
yeah,
Okay.
well, now, is it fair to the black guy who didn't mug or beat up anyone that there's racism? No, it's not fair to him. It's also a predictable and, frankly, at times an understandable response from someone who was a victim of getting mugged and beat up. And so if you're, if you're a black person who's like in the public eye, it might be reasonable at that point to go, "Hey guys, we gotta stop mugging people and beating them up. Otherwise, they're gonna hate us." And the way I always looked at it, this always just came very natural to me. Like, this was so obvious. I'm Jewish. I love Jewish people. I love Jewish culture. It's who I am. It's a big part of me. And I think some of the best things about me I got from Jewish culture, valuing intellectual curiosity and family and hard work and humor and a lot of things that really define who I am are very much a part of Jewish culture.
Total refusal to go along with whatever else
for
is saying.
sure.
Yep.
For sure. Also just whining about things, complaining, fetching, this is all part of me. It's what I do for a living. It turned it into a pretty nice career.
That's right.
But that being said, it's like, I just look at it, I go, okay, so all the stories I've heard from my family and our history are how we were brutally oppressed here and killed here and kicked out of here and relocated here. And then we came to America. Now, I have grown up in the United States of America. This is where my kids live. It's where they're going to grow up. As you say all the time, that's the only thing that matters to me, is that my kids have the best life I can give them. Literally the only thing that matters to me. Everything is a very distant second from that. And I go, okay, so we're 2% of the population in America. We are, by all objective standards, thriving. We're doing great. Jews are not an oppressed minority in America. We're doing better than the average American is doing, substantially. And I've never
How about
once,
that?
I mean, I don't know. I've had like people on Twitter say things to me or something like that, but there's never once been an obstacle put in my way because I was Jewish. I never couldn't go to this school or couldn't get this job or couldn't do anything like that. And I've had a really great life here. In fact, probably the most like anti-Semitism I've ever dealt with is from the pro-Israel people who call me like a capo every day because I don't support another reckless war. So
Capos were the Jewish enforcers,
Jewish collaborators with the Nazis.
in the ghettos.
Yeah.
Right.
So, it was a really nasty thing to call somebody, but whatever. That's the game we're in. So my perspective is like, okay, so you're telling me the whole world treated us like crap. We've come here to America where we've been just very successful and treated very well. My default position is to love the country for that. Like, oh, well, then we should be really grateful to this country. That should be the attitude. Not going around lecturing people about whether they've been to the museum about our suffering from decades ago. Like, what is that? It just seems like such a... And look, again, a lot of the critics of Israel are left-wingers. I'm not coming at this from a left-wing perspective. Right. I'm a crotchety old right-winger. Like, I don't agree with any of that. I'm sitting here and saying, if any self-respecting conservative or self-respecting right-winger saw any other minority group complaining about their mistreatment in another continent, in another country, in another century, you'd go, hey, shut up.
Yep.
Get over it. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. That's like what I'm saying. And then, by the way, with Jews, like, oh, you already did. You pulled yourself up by your bootstraps. So, like, what are we even talking about here? Why? And I don't think, I don't think like obsessing.
Because if they don't keep doing that, then they can't justify Israel and what they're doing there. So the perpetual suffering has to continue to continually justify Israel, the Israeli government, the atrocities that they're committing. That is why there is perpetual suffering amongst that group of people.
Over past trauma is always the correct answer, and certainly not insisting that everybody else suffer over or obsess over your past trauma. So I just always, it was always very natural to me that, like, I'm on Team America. I'm rooting for this country to succeed.
The country that fought the Nazis.
Yeah,
by the
right.
way.
Yeah, right.
Lost a lot of Americans fighting the Nazis. Why are you lecturing me about the Nazis?
Yeah.
My country fought them.
And to almost anybody, like anybody at Fox News. Now, again, maybe I talk about like Mark Levin and Fox News and these guys like too much. Like they really are irrelevant. But I guess it's just that I'm stuck in the old, you know, I'm the age I am. And so to me, it's.
But they're not irrelevant, right? You got Mark Levin up on stage hugging President Trump. You got Mark Levin, who is leading the Israel lobby. You got Ben Shapiro and Josh Hammer, who are the leading propagandists for the Israeli government. You have Turning Point USA, which has been completely taken over by Christian Zionists with Jewish money. It's not irrelevant. Like, this is what's going on. And that's why I say we are no longer a sovereign nation, because this shit is happening.
Still, like, hey, this is Fox. But any one of them would completely agree with me on this if we were talking about any other group of people. You know, if we were talking about any other group of people talking about victimhood or any of that, you know, if there was some black, guy talking about how racist this country is because of slavery, they would have made your exact point. They'd go, we fought a war to end slavery.
Yep.
Hundreds of thousands of us died. Fight. You know what I mean? Like they would right away.
Wasn't even here, so back off.
Yeah,
like,
right.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And underneath all of this, and the reason that I really do worry that the country is going to become like openly tribal, and that leads to violence every time.
We already
is
are.
That a lot of the same people who are upset about the rise in anti-Semitism, which again I think is real. I mean, I can tell it's real, and I don't like it either, are the ones who abetted all the anti-white hate for so long, which is still not being addressed. The Trump administration sued Harvard over its anti-Jewish discrimination, which is like, it's deranged.
What a slap in the face to white people.
Well, it's unbelievable.
Oh my God.
And of course the anti-white hate is still totally embedded at every level of our government and in business and most famously in schools. Yep. So that's like an attempt to hurt people on the basis of their race, and no one has said anything about it. And my point is, these are either universal principles, they apply to every human being endowed with human rights by the Creator, or they're just preferences. It's just your tribe against mine, and then I'm allowed to fight your tribe for the benefit of my tribe. Like, and it just devolves into Rwanda. So, like, I think we could diffuse a lot of this if, like, the head of the ADL would be like, I'm every bit as opposed to anti-white hate as I am to anti-Jewish hate. If we could all just agree that it's all wrong, then we decelerate. But until then, how can I take you seriously?
Yeah, and I think along with that is we have to stop fighting wars on behalf of Israel, and we have to have some type of separation. I mean, I'm not saying that, like, I'm not saying we should be enemies with Israel or that we should go to war with Israel or anything like that, but
we cannot have dual citizens of Israel holding office as in Congress or in Senate because they have dual loyalty. If you are going to be an American politician running for public office on the national level, it really should be on any level, but especially on the national level, You should not be a dual citizen. There should be no question about where your loyalties lie. Your loyalties need to lie with the American people. Period. End of story.
It just, the relationship, the special relationship between the US and Israel is so freaking weird. And now in this new media environment, it's been exposed. I don't think you can put that toothpaste back in the tube. It is something that I think a lot of people were kind of happy to look the other way about for years.
You came on my show. You came to Maine a couple of years ago to do something on Ukraine, and Greenwald too, who I love and have known a long time. And both of you like had a moment where you're like, yeah, and Israel's probably. And I'm like, I agree, but like I don't want to. You know, I just want to pretend this isn't happening. It's not worth it. I don't want to be denounced by Chabad or whatever. I just don't want to have the fight.
Well, you let me or Glenn Greenwald in your door, and that will not be happening.
Yes,
I get it. No, I get it.
I was part of that. Like it's just not worth it.
Well, look, even in my opinion, the greatest living American hero, Ron Paul, he would kind of like try to say it in a gentle way. Yeah, like he would go, well, look, let's let them fight their own fights, and we'll just kind of be over here being non-interventionist. Because, of course, on one hand, it's like, look, there's a lot of things. First of all, I don't know if people who are listening to this show can appreciate this, but you know this much better than I do. But there was a time, Donald Trump will kind of say this out loud. He'll say that, AIPAC used to totally control Congress, and now they don't control them anymore. Like, he'll just say it, which is so wild. They give me hundreds of millions of dollars, and I do whatever they want. It's like, all right, dude, you're just saying that out loud. I thought that was like an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory, not just something the president
said. He said it in the Knesset, of all places.
Oh, my God. But the thing is, right?
Miriam Adelson.
In the old order, before there were podcasts like this, and look, if you think about, like, I used to always point to the example because I thought it was so interesting about where the technology, where social media was, is when Bill O'Reilly was the #1 show at Fox News, the number one show in cable news, and at the 8 p.m. hour. You were also the #1 show at Fox News, the #1 show in cable news at the 8 p.m. hour. When they fired Bill O'Reilly went from being like one of the biggest voices in the national conversation to being like relegated over to the sidelines, who's like, he still has a show somewhere, but he's not like really moving the needle at all. You got bigger than you were there. And part of that was who you were, who your audience was.
It was technology.
But a big part of it was that you had another platform to go right to.
I would be fly fishing full time if it weren't for the technology.
So maybe the technology ruined your life. You could have just gone and had a happy life. So they pulled you back in. But I don't know that people appreciate how much in the old order, in the old days when Bill getting fired took you out of the conversation with Bill O'Reilly days or whatever before that, getting the Israel lobby on your back would ruin you. It would absolutely ruin you.
One thing you couldn't
do. And it didn't matter who you were.
Absolutely sleep with the makeup artist.
Yep.
You could not fight with the ADL.
That's right. I mean, that was just it. That was just it. I mean, and there's so much, whether it's the ADL or the Southern Poverty Law Center or AIPAC or, whatever, any of the American Enterprise Institute or National Review or the Israel lobby is like this huge, powerful thing. And back then, it didn't matter if you were Pat Buchanan. You're like, dude, I'm Pat Buchanan. I've been in four White Houses.
I won the New Hampshire primary.
Yes, I won the New Hampshire primary. I've been in three or four different presidential administrations, a New York Times bestseller, a fixture in America. He hosted Crossfire when Crossfire first started. Doesn't matter. They could take you out. They could take Ron Paul. They could take all. And so there was, for many years, almost, I feel like, a leftover residue of like, you just don't want this fight because, man, is this going to get ugly.
Do you know that AIPAC has a 98% success rate when they back a candidate for public office? 98% success rate. So only 2% of the time, the American public disagrees with AIPAC enough to elect the candidate that AIPAC didn't want. Does that sound right to you? Because that sounds like a fucking problem.
And you're going to be smeared as every vicious name in the book. But at a certain point, it was like, oh, well, you kind of can talk about these things now. And in fact, the people who do talk about them are being rewarded by their viewers because it's refreshing that someone's talking about the thing you weren't allowed to talk about. But now that has been exposed and the toothpaste can't be put back in the tube, it's just too much. You cannot have, and I know you talk about this a lot. You look at examples like, and these examples are countless. You look at Ted Cruz saying to your face, as he said at other places, that the reason he ran for Senate was to be Israel's #1 defender. You got Tammy Bruce saying America's the second best country to Israel. Kind of tongue-in-cheek, still a really weird thing for an official from the administration to say. You got Donald Trump saying that Sheldon and now Miriam Adelson give him hundreds of millions of dollars, and all they want, they come in every day asking for stuff on behalf of a foreign country, and he gives it to them.
Which they love more than America, he said.
Sheldon was on tape. Have you seen this?
Yes.
He was on tape. He said his greatest regret in life is that he wore the U.S. military uniform rather than the IDF uniform. Now, I'm sorry, that is intolerable from any just sane perspective. This has nothing to do with hating Jews or even hating any other country. If people were talking like this about Norway, we'd be like, yo, what are you doing? This isn't Norway. This is America.
I agree.
And like, there's...
Move to Norway.
Yeah, fine, go ahead. But no, you can't. And then to have, people like Mike Huckabee saying that God promised Lebanon and Saudi Arabia to Netanyahu, like, I'm sorry, but there's just this is simply not how public policy maker, I guess it's not a policy maker, but a politician, an ambassador to this country, you can't be talking this way. This is insane. Like, we don't let anybody just dictate their policy off God told me to do this, and then a very weird God told me something on behalf of a foreign country. So I think we're at a point where and this is kind of my rejoinder to a lot of those, people who call me and you anti-Semite. I guess I'm a self-hating Jew and you're an anti-Semite. Because listen, man, there is a rise of Jew hatred. And if you really do care about that, the only way to combat that is that we got to end this. Like the same way we needed a separation of church and state so we don't fight religious wars anymore, we need a separation of the Israel lobby and the United States of America.
I think it's tough. It's tough. As a non-Israel hater, I don't hate anyone. I'm not going to allow myself to hate anyone, period. But I'm just being as honest as I can be. We're very enmeshed, like more than people understand. The representatives, official and non-official, of the Israeli government throughout the U.S. government at every single level, state and federal, okay? There's that. In our institutions, that would include the Pentagon and CIA, our biggest and most important. And then there's the question of, like, what does that mean for Israel? Like, do they just allow the United States to be like, you're just like, whatever, France now, or Spain, we're going to treat you like, an ally, but not a sibling. I think that we get punished for that. People are afraid of Israel. That's the difference between Israel and Spain. Everyone loves Spain. It's great. The Spanish, we can have bases there. You can put missiles there. It's all great. But no one thinks if you pull back aid from Spain, they're going to hurt you. But everyone is afraid of being physically hurt by Israel. Maybe they're overstating it. Maybe they're all anti-Semitic and paranoid. I don't know. I can just tell you from living in D.C., there is a fear of them, real fear. Yeah. And anyone who says this country is freaking lying.
No, it's like saying there's a fear of the intelligence agencies. Like, that's a fact. It's a fact.
I think we're pretty out in the open about that now.
Yeah. Well, that's right. That's right. And it's so if that's the case, that it's almost like our leaders are just too afraid to do something.
Well, of course
about this
they're afraid. And I don't know the genesis of that fear. Like, maybe they're all just reading the Protocols Elders Design, and maybe they're all anti-Semites and they're overstating the influence of Jews or whatever. I mean, that's totally possible. People do make crazy calculations. Maybe there really is a physical threat, but it's not arguable that U.S. policymakers at every level are afraid. This is not all voluntary at all.
Yeah. Well, it's
hey guys, like, share,
about,
comment, subscribe.
I like Megyn Kelly.
Anything to help the channel.
Who said this? I don't know if she coined the term, but she was the first one I heard say it. But I think it was with you, where she said the Israel firsters. And that was how she described it. I was like, oh, that's a really good term for them. Because, the thing is that you know, John Mearsheimer and Stephen Walt, like they call it the Israel lobby. But then when you say that, a lot of people just think you're talking about AIPAC. But they're not just talking about AIPAC. They're talking about this whole different, all these different organizations and individuals.
The Heritage Foundation, and Washington Post, and everybody.
Washington Institute for Near East Policy, and you know, all of these organizations, and then all these individuals who clearly are here to. That is their number one issue. And the thing I almost resent most about them is like, it's like, just admit that. Just admit that this is what you care about more than anything else. Barry Weiss, clearly you do, right? Like this is so.
I agree.
Because then in effect you are like a foreign spy. You're kind of like an agent for a different government. And the point is that, you know, because people will try to argue the technicalities of this, but the point is that the whole global war on terrorism was all a bunch of Israel firsters who pushed the administration into that at every level. You know, this is, by the way, you'll like this just because some people don't get this, but so David Wormser, who you know, worked for Dick Cheney and he's the author of the Clean Break memo. So I talk about this all the time, a lot of different podcasts, on yours, on Rogan's. I brought up the Clean Break and how that's what this whole real strategy is. It's what the Clean Break morphed into, is essentially, and you could look at this, David Wormser and Richard Pearl and Douglas Feif wrote the Clean Break memo to Benjamin Netanyahu in 1996, first became prime minister for his first term. And he had written a book, which is worth reading, called Fighting Terrorism. Very easy read, by the way. It's a little book that Benjamin Netanyahu had written the year before. And essentially, the break was from Oslo, was from the peace process. The break was from Yitzhak Rabin, who had now been murdered by a Benjamin Netanyahu fan after Benjamin Netanyahu really pushed. I mean, that's a whole other can of worms, by the way. But I know, like, if Yitzhak Rabin's wife, I believe, still blames Benjamin Netanyahu for his death.
Many in Israel do.
Yeah,
now there's a lobbying campaign to get the murderer out of prison. Who killed
he was given anti-Rabin marches, and they were holding coffins before he died. They were like implying like someone should kill this guy, because he had said, not that he was really ever going to do this, but he had said, we got to find a two-state solution. We got to give the Palestinians their own state, and we'll start working toward that. Now, the Clean Break was the neoconservatives' brilliant idea, the Israel firsters here, that, well, no, see, you got this all wrong. You think you need to make peace with the Palestinians because that's the only way that you'll normalize relations with the broader Arab world. But no. We just got to go topple the broader Arab world and overthrow all those governments, and then you never have to make peace with the Palestinians. Okay, so it's essentially a blueprint for greater Israel, and this was their whole strategy pre 9/11.
And for regional hegemony. Now, it's not just about controlling
the
West Bank; it's about controlling the Middle East.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so now, because we live in this crazy world we live in now, David Wormser did a podcast where he responded to me. Now, from my perspective, I'm little old me, some stand-up comedian who just talks about all this stuff. This is David Wormser. This is the guy who's the author of the Clean Break memo. But to the new internet world, he has like 300 followers on Twitter. Nobody saw this. Nobody knows about it. But so David Wormser, and he's there to debunk my interpretation of the Clean Break memo. This is the funniest thing I've ever seen in my life. And so the host brings him on to be like, oh, this Dave Smith guy's out here saying that all these wars were about Israel and blah, blah, blah. And this is ridiculous, right? So why don't you just tell him that this is all not true? And his response was he just goes into like a monologue about how Israel is the cradle of civilization, and that all of Western civilization is downstream from Israel, and that we always must protect. So anyway, in the attempt to prove me wrong, he just totally exposes that, like, this is the mentality that all of these guys have. So if Mike Huckabee supports a war for Israel, in his mind, that's not selling out your country for another country. This is God's plan. You know what I mean? Like this. So they're all it's like the fish doesn't know he's in water.
Right. That's the problem with having dual citizenship for people in national public office. That is the issue, because their loyalties don't only lie with the American people. So if you are a dual citizen, like a lot of members of Congress and the Senate are, they should not be in office. Your loyalties should be to the Americans and the Americans only.
Right.
Like, they don't even realize they're the Israel lobby. They go, what are you talking about?
So this is
like,
what Jeff Sachs said to me. Jeff Sachs, who's often attacked. Jeff Sachs is really smart, and I think
Very
Jeff Sachs
smart.
is a decent guy. And we don't agree on everything, but like he's an honest guy. Like he just says. So I say to him, "You've been watching this all these years. What do you think this is about? Why does this tiny country have so much control over our giant continent-sized country?" And he said, "Well, you know, a lot of contributions. There are threats or questions about the Kennedy assassination. Like they're willing to use force in assassinations to get what they want." He goes, "But I don't think that explains it. I don't think either one of those, bribery or threats, carrot or stick, I don't think that actually is the whole picture. There's a spell of some kind. There's like a supernatural quality to this. Good people, like I don't think Mike Huckabee is like in favor of genocide. I just don't think that. Pretty nice guy, very nice guy actually. But he believes with this fervor that suggests that he's not thinking clearly. Like there's another quality here. And do you know what I'm talking about?
yeah, no,
Yeah, you know what that other quality is? The other quality is American pastors using the Bible to manipulate Christians into believing the Zionist agenda. That is what's going on. That's what Turning Point really was. It was a vessel for Zionists to manipulate the evangelical side of the conservative right to support the Zionist cause.
oh, 100%.
And I think Jeff Sachs is pretty secular
And that's why Charlie got killed.
guy, by the way. I don't know, but Jeff's not a religious extremist. That I can say
for
that.
sure.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, but everyone recognizes, like I told you last time, there's no such thing as atheists. They think they are atheists, but no one
But you
really
were an
is.
atheist.
No, but I wasn't. But I thought I was. But you never really are. It's not
Why
like
did
you can't.
think you were?
Well, because I would just say, I don't really believe in any of that, and I don't think that that's real. But of course, like as I told you the story last time I was here, then when my daughter is born and I'm worried about her life, I immediately find, and it's like I always knew. That was always in there on some level. So I remember one time hearing this debate, and I wish I could remember who it was, but it was like a theist-atheist debate. And it might have been Christopher Hitchens or something like, maybe not. But it was one of those like, does God exist debates. And so the guy arguing that God does exist said something about how there are spiritual forces in the world and blah, blah, blah. And there are evil spirits, he said. There are evil spirits. And then the atheist guy goes, look, like we all know that there's depression and there's this and there's this. We all know that there's dark forces in the world, but you don't need a supernatural explanation. I'm like, did you just say dark forces? What, like dark forces? I mean, what is that? You're saying the same thing in different language, man. Like it's just like there's actually no gap here between. Anyway, but so yeah, I do think there's a spiritual component to all of this.
It feels
for
that
sure.
way because
There is.
I don't want to be the kind of person who imputes the worst motives to my opponents, okay?
Yeah.
But I am, because most people are like, why is this person doing something that's insane, doesn't make sense, it's irrational, getting paid? Like that's always the first explanation that people come to, and I have myself thought that. But then if you know someone really well, I'm not intimate with Huckabee, but I've known him for so many, 30 years, more than. It's like, I don't think Huckabee is, he's into money, I get it, but I don't think he's like totally motivated by greed. I just don't believe that.
No, he is a evangelical Christian that has had Christianity manipulated to support Zionism, even though it was those people that rejected Jesus. So tell me how that makes sense. That is the level of indoctrination that some of these people have accepted.
No, I think there's, well, look, I think,
And I don't think he's evil, but he's defending evil. So what is that?
I think a few things can be true at the same time, right? So it can be that you're under a spell, that there's a spiritual aspect to it. And then it can also be that there's soft incentives for you to continue being 100%. Under that spell, right? And so the history of Jewish influence Israeli influence. I mean, look, obviously, much of this goes back to the fact that Jews dominated finance for many years, and part of this was because Christians weren't allowed to lend
Usury
money
was
credit, right?
Yeah.
But there is a form, obviously, of like abusive usury, right? There are loan sharks out there. There are, some of them are even credit card companies that will charge you like 30% interest or 29.9 whatever they're allowed to do on, which is like kind of a crazy interest rate. And they kind of prey on desperate people.
How about eat now, pay later for Uber? Like, it's insane.
Now, they're not necessarily, like even the loan shark or the credit card companies, they're just kind of benefiting off your desperation, because it's not like if the credit card company wasn't there, it's not like, oh, now everything's okay. The reason they're putting necessities on the credit card to begin with is because other conditions have, led them to this desperate place.
Totally.
But the problem, so then you had for much of Christendom, right, it's completely banned to lend money at any interest, which is that, I do not think is abusive to have any interest rate on your money, because that's actually a very necessary part of an economy. There are people who have a very good idea but don't have any capital. And then there's people sitting with capital and they go, well, look, I can't just give this to you, because if you lose it, then I just lose my money. And if you pay me back, all I've gotten is that I get my money later rather than having it right now.
If you have my money, then I can't use it.
Right,
for
right,
whatever
exactly.
thing I want to build.
Right.
So there's a cost to me to lending you my money.
However, if I go, hey, I'll lend this to you, but you pay me back a little bit of interest, this actually really facilitates economic growth, because, or just good businesses being created, because like, oh yeah, the guy with a good idea but with no capital now can. So anyway, so Jewish bankers ended up kind of filling this void. And then you had very powerful Jewish groups who became very, very wealthy in banking, and yada, yada, a lot of things later. Banking got very, very corrupt. But again, it's important to keep in mind, this wasn't most Jews. Most Jews were living in poverty. But like the Balfour Declaration is written to the Rothschilds, right? Like it's not, the creation of Israel was at least part, they had international finance backing them. And so that's also true in America, that much of the largest banking institutions had some Jewish influence. It's also the case that after the creation of the state of Israel, you have the Mossad, right? Or you have Israeli intelligence. And now Jews are smart, not like that much smarter than everybody else, but they're a pretty smart group. And then the Mossad had an advantage over every other intelligence organization that would really be a dream for any intelligence organization. But the Mossad had a diaspora of people all spread out in the world that were Jewish, right? And also there was this wide cultural belief amongst Jews that the Holocaust is what gave birth to the state of Israel, and that the state of Israel is the guarantor of another Holocaust not happening. And so
I have a question that I don't have an answer to. If God exiled the Jews from Israel, isn't the state of Israel itself going against what God chose for them? God chose to put them in exile, so they are defying God's wishes by creating a state and expanding its borders and having a genocide. You would think that if God put them in exile, they would stay in exile instead of disobeying God. Just a thought. I don't know. I mean, could be wrong. Something to think about.
Could imagine the CIA had that. Imagine you just had little Americans in every single country, little groups of Americans, maybe not every single country, but you had pockets of them in lots of different places, and they really passionately believed that the existence of the United States of America was the most important thing in the world. What an advantage for them. Go around, hey, find any American somewhere. You want to serve your country? You want to do that? And so I think between finance, between the Mossad, and then when the neoconservatives, who really were not old money, when they first came into it, right? Like if
Not
you know
at
the
all.
first generation of neoconservatives, they were having their debates at City College, not at Harvard. You know what I mean?
Literally,
like they were
City College.
Yes, these were middle class guys,
working class.
They weren't the Rockefeller guys or the Morgan guys. They weren't at the Council on Foreign Relations. But what they did was they went and they made their relationships with the military-industrial complex themselves. And a lot of this was, the problem is that you create this empire, you create this military-industrial complex, this big government scheme, and then it's right for someone to take it over. And if you go look at like every last one of those Bill Kristol think tanks, so Bill Kristol needs to have 16 think tanks. He doesn't have a thought in his head, but he's got all of the literally
Couldn't even
never
read a New York Times column.
Like his dad was smart for all his problems,
Kristol is
but
not smart.
Bill Kristol was never smart. He was revered as the smart guy. Never said anything
Dan
smart.
Quayle's brain.
Yeah, literally. But every last one of those think tanks is funded by Lockheed Martin or Raytheon or whatever. So it's like the thing is that a lot of times in government, it's a very different thing to be like swim with the current than to swim against the current. There's no such thing as a Fabian libertarian. You might have some hardcore communists, and then you have like an AOC who's like, I want incrementally more government. You can't get incrementally less government because that's asking the government to have less power. Now, if you're the neoconservatives and you come around with like, hey, I've got a plan to fight forever wars, I've got a plan to go topple all of these different countries, you're going to get some money from weapons companies. And so anyway, just saying, aside from the spiritual
fascism, I thought that's what fascism was. I mean, leaving aside the anti-Semitic component of the Nazis, which was a big component, but the idea of fascism that the state, merges with the industrial powers with the private sector.
This is what it is. And also just swap out the Jew hatred and make it Muslim hatred or make it German hatred or Russian hatred or whatever it is. They always pick another
Ethnic
thing
hatred,
to some ethnic hatred. So yeah, it's not, but that's exactly right. Fascism won. Man, it's so ironic. It's the same sometimes when you win, you really lose. They could say on paper, and I'm sure
Andrew,
there's some historian,
brother?
professor who would say, no, like capitalism and communism won the Second World War and fascism was defeated. Except what arose out of it was the fascist model for everybody, essentially, right? Which is, and again, fascism is kind of ill-defined, but
kind of ill-defined.
Yeah, well, but broadly speaking, I mean, what are we talking about? The FDR and the entire progressive movement, the original progressive movement, this is what they were advocating for, right? It's like we got to get away from laissez-faire free markets. We're not going total communist, but we need a strong, powerful state, powerful enough to regulate the economy and the country, and then also fight wars abroad. I mean,
without majority support.
Yeah, I just don't really see what, and we can cling to this idea of democracy, which is always really an illusion. It's never really true. It doesn't really, in fact, there was a study.
I don't think that we have been a legitimate democracy since Kennedy. I think it's all been smoke and mirrors, honestly.
Done, I want to say this was at Princeton, if I'm remembering correctly. This was like maybe 15, 20 years ago. But they did a study where they said, they just concluded that we're an oligarchy, not a democracy. And they literally just went through it empirically and were like, the American people's feeling has no impact on
no
policy.
bearing whatsoever.
You could say we have elections, and if you really don't like George W. Bush, you can vote for Barack Obama instead of John McCain. But what'd you vote for him for? Because he said he'd close Guantanamo Bay and end the wars. Guantanamo Bay is still open today, and we're on the 7th war of Wesley Clark's 7 wars in 5 countries. None of that stopped. What did we get during Obama? We got a massive escalation in Afghanistan. We got wars in Libya, in Syria, in Yemen, drone bombing campaigns in Pakistan, continued the war in Iraq, ended the war in Iraq, then reinvaded Iraq when his pet ISIS left over from the war in Syria.
So I think
back.
You're describing the upside of all of this. Again, I haven't slept 8 hours in a month. I'm so distressed. I'm not in no sense for this. I argued against it, obviously, but it's happening, and this is the end of the empire as we knew it. Hopefully, it'll shrink back into something manageable that serves our interests. But who knows what'll happen? but we're definitely not going back to where we were a month ago.
The problem with the empire shrinking is we have too much currency floating around. And if the empire shrinks, the economy is going to collapse. Because the economy is propped up by the petrodollar, and there is no way to shrink the power structure and stature of the United States without completely annihilating the economy.
We know that. So what are the upsides? Well, one upside is you might wind up at some point with presidents who want to run the United States. No president wants to run the United States, because why would you want to run the U.S. when you can run the world?
Yeah.
By the way, you don't know the people you manage when you run the world. They don't like come to your office and complain about your treatment of them. It's like there's no cost. It's all upside. You're the king of the world. I don't think future presidents will have that option. And so maybe we'll get people who are like, LaGuardia Airport smells. The Miami airport is like an atrocity. Maybe we should fix that. Don't you think?
Yeah. Well,
maybe this will cause like a reorientation back to what matters, which is our country.
Yeah, quite possibly. And that's really.
That's not going to happen until we get career politicians out of office. Because the separation from the political class to the average American is so far right now that they have no idea what it's like to work for 40 hours a week and have no money at the end of the week. They don't have a fucking clue.
The best case scenario. And, I try to, I look at
no, you're right.
models like, when the Soviet Union collapsed, right, I remember there was so Murray Rothbard talked about this in a speech once. Murray Rothbard, for people who don't know, is, in my opinion, like the most brilliant political theorist of the 20th century. He's a genius. And he was, of course, he ended up supporting Pat Buchanan in 1992.
Yeah,
he was an economist and a historian and a philosopher. And so he was talking about, I guess this was like the speech he gave shortly after the collapse of the Soviet Union. And he was talking about how he had seen like a video of a Chinese family under Chinese communism at the time. I guess maybe this was back, he was talking about from like before Mao Zedong died. And he said that the interviewer asked him questions. They were just talking about how much they love the regime, and how he said, "Would you rather your kids had a?" It was something like, "Would you rather your kids had a prosperous life, or were loyal servants of the regime and had a very difficult life?" And he says, "Loyal servants of the regime and a very difficult life, no problem." And so Murray Rothbard said he watched this and he was like, "My God, I mean, this is just so horrible. Like, they've actually done it. They've created the communist man and destroyed the human soul." And then he's talking to his buddy, who's another genius who went to China a lot and was like a China expert. And he goes, "No, that's what they say when the cameras are there. That's all that is." It's like, that doesn't believe that. You know what I mean? They just know this is on tape. You can't say anything else. And so that's what you say. And then they go about their day not really caring what the regime says. And so like when the Soviet Union collapsed, from all like I've read about it, like that was essentially the state of the Soviet Union was like no one believed the government anymore. They just all knew they were liars.
That's right.
They all knew this was bullshit.
That's right.
And they were really actually...
We're in the Brezhnev era here.
Right. And so now... Of course, the war hawks and the neoconservatives, they always viewed us luring the Soviets into Afghanistan and getting them bogged down there fighting the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, including the foreign Arab Mujahideen and Osama bin Laden, who we were supporting. But they always viewed this as a great success because it brought down the Soviet Union. And I don't know enough about what factor led to what. I mean, communism is not an effective economic system, but I'm sure the war did hurt them a lot. I know how costly wars can be and how much they can degrade our country. I know wars in Afghanistan can degrade your country. So I'm sure that was part of it. But my point is that it wasn't like America went in and toppled the USSR, right? Like they collapsed on their own, partly as a result of fighting foreign wars and partly as a result of, just government lying and terrible economic policies. But at a certain point, like the soldiers just weren't willing to fire. Like there were attempted
counter coups. Yeah.
Yes, there were attempted coups in the past where they did fire and they were like, no, you're not leaving the Soviet Union. But by this point in 89 or whatever it was, as the people started rising up, they were like, we're not doing this anymore. They themselves don't believe it anymore. The government. And so I guess it's a long way to get to what I'm saying, but like at a certain point, we might hit a point where like the people just aren't believing this anymore. The law enforcement, whether military or police, just aren't going to crack down on the American people in that way. And that would maybe lead to a rise of a real president who actually ran the country. And I don't know, I think if I'm not mistaken, I believe in when there was like German reunification, they didn't, from what I understand, they didn't really punish like the people in the communist government.
No.
They kept them on their pensions.
Absolutely.
They went kind of, and I feel like we almost need something like that. I know Curtis Yarvin's talked about this a bit, but something where it's like, look, man, I think there are some people at the absolute top who need to be criminally prosecuted, but like, we got to find a transition from here to there. Like if we're buying off bureaucrats, that would be cheaper than continuing this system. You know what I mean? Like there's almost something where if a president could come up and say like, hey, all you guys working in the intelligence agencies who were working to undermine presidents, you all have amnesty, but you got to pack up and go home right now. Like that's it. In a weird way, we need, as you said, we need an actual president who's actually running the country.
And who can restore peace here. I mean, I think older Americans believe their country is more united and cohesive than it really is. You've got an entire generation of people who weren't born here, whose parents weren't born here, who came here on the promise that can't be fulfilled, which is that, of a better life economically. And I think it's going to be tough to make good on that promise, honestly. And so what do you do with that? What do you do with dashed expectations at scale? Millions of people who kind of thought they were getting something and didn't get it.
Yeah.
A country where half of all households get a government check. Half of all households. So,
and the average age of the first-time homeowner is 40.
Yeah, exactly. So you've got a lot of issues here, and all of our attention is there. It's in the Persian Gulf or China or Venezuela, wherever. But once you readjust and start thinking about how does this country deal with dashed expectations and remain coherent, how does it prevent the rise of like a truly dangerous demagogue?
Yeah, yeah. Well, also, it's not like it's not just that we're focused over there and so we're not taking care of what's going on here. It's the focus over there is destroying over here.
100%, as it always does.
Okay, so the angriest I've ever been at you was when you said that, you said Lindsey Graham's views are war everywhere and Austrian economics at home. And I was like, no, Tucker,
you're right,
no.
you're right.
Austrian economics. No, but look, I mean, because, and it's not just, I don't care about just like the term, but it's the idea is that essentially what's going on
monopoly capitalism.
Yes, yes, but the opposite of Austrian economics.
I know.
Big government, central banking, record high government spending every single year. And so what happens essentially is, and this is what I'm so furious at this administration over this stuff. And I don't know, you're in more of a you're in a tougher position than I am, where you were the guy in Trump's ear trying to convince him not to do this, or one of the guys who got to meet with him and convince him not to do this.
I think the only one. Actually.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Well, the last one is no longer with us. So there's that. And yeah. So, but so the thing is, like me, I'm no good at being a political strategist. Like I said, I'm just good at being a podcaster.
I just had a flash of rage that was so intense, I lost my vision.
Yeah, no, I understand. Well, it's worth it. There's some things worth being that angry over.
Sorry.
But so I kind of go, I don't know political strategy stuff, but I go, I think you should just try your best to stay being able to. At least he has one person who's telling him to do this. But the thing is that I'm just not capable of doing that, and I'm not close to the administration, so I'm just like red behind the eyes, furious. But one of the big things I'm furious about is that they're handing this country right back over to the Democrats, who really are every bit the threat that we were making them out to be over the last.
So just to drive home this point, remember during the campaign how we talked about how we had a big tent, right? It was a big coalition with a lot of different views, but the one thing that everybody agreed on was no foreign wars. Well, Trump has shattered that coalition into a million pieces. The majority of people on the right that feel the way I do are going to end up not voting. And the Democrats are going to take the House and the Senate and probably the White House. Because if they try to run J.D. Vance with an Erica Kirk ticket or Marco Rubio, it's never going to happen. So the Republicans they are in a very, very, very fucking bad spot right now. And this is all Trump's doing.
And they're race haters too.
And they're going to come in more authoritarian and more angry because they are furious that we disobeyed them and put Donald Trump back in the White House. There's and like all their plan. I mean, look, we saw what they did through COVID. We saw what they did with tech censorship. And I don't want to find out what a central bank digital currency looks like and what carbon, social credit scores look like. And the thing is that you watch the Democrats as they're winning now, right? Like you could look at the races when Mamdani won in New York, when the new governor won in New Jersey, the new governor in Virginia. There had been a couple races in Texas where they were like outperforming what they should be performing in Texas. Every last one of them is running on what they now call unaffordability. Yep. It's like they just made up a new term because and literally none of them, I really don't think if I had one of them sitting where you're sitting right here and I was grilling them and I could go, what is unaffordability? I don't think one of them has an answer. No. I don't even think they know the term currency debasement.
And
I don't even think they know that that's what it is.
No respect for human rights at all.
Oh, no, none.
So here in Virginia, which was conservative or normal 20 minutes ago, they bring in some guy literally born in India from another country to lead the effort to confiscate people's guns and no more self-defense in the state. This just happened. Yeah. I mean, it was like not long ago. I mean, a year ago, they had a Republican governor. So it's an evenly, not much of one, but it's an even.
Hey, I'm pausing this. We're going to the moon.
Mission elapsed time, passing 1 minute, approaching max Q.
On, Ponce de Leon. Stan, we have you loud and clear on Ponce de Leon.
Sorry, guys.
Have you the same?
Communication signal transfer confirmed as Integrity and its crew go supersonic. Approaching 90 seconds into the Artemis II mission. Integrity is 14 miles in altitude, 8 miles downrange, traveling more than 2,600 miles per hour.
I'm going to run out soon so I can maybe see this.
Let's go.
But not yet. About T+5 I will.
1 minute 50 seconds of mission elapsed time. Standing by for main engine throttle down to 85%. Ahead of solid rocket booster separation expected at the 2 minute 9 second mark.
Let's go.
We see throttle down. Confirmed separation. Main engine throttling up. Guidance converged.
That's some space junk.
Let's go.
Integrity, guidance converged, performance nominal, upper stage RCS ready.
Get ready for the big fireworks right now.
Let's go.
Integrity, SM priming complete. SM priming complete.
Good for them, man.
2 minutes 45 seconds of mission elapsed time into the Artemis II mission. Thrusters
Good for them.
And upper stage confirmed in a ready state ahead of service module separation.
Sorry about that.
3 minutes into the flight. Integrity 49 miles in altitude, 78 miles downrange. Now passing 5,000 miles per hour.
They're up in the ionosphere now, the lower part.
Standing by for launch abort system jettison.
Houston Integrity, good last jettison, great view. Copy jettison, Team Eco 8+02.
I don't know why CBS doesn't have any volume. It froze. Trying to find another one.
Oh, yeah. So a lot of people teared up when they are looking at this. Been waiting for a while. We put the technology back. Someone has to redo the whole thing to get to where we are now. So, yeah, all we might see now is the
Integrity GPS processing.
Hold on, guys. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. There we go.
3-engine press.
On time, now passing 5 minutes 20 seconds of mission elapsed time into the Artemis II mission. At this point, 3 good main engines are all that's needed to carry Integrity to a nominal main engine cutoff target. Though at this time, we're seeing 4 good engines here in Mission Control Houston. Integrity, 75 miles in altitude, 330 miles downrange, approaching 10,000 miles per hour.
Holy shit. Wow. Sorry for the break in the interview, guys, but I kinda had to put this on.
Integrity looking good at 6 minutes.
Hell yeah.
Same on board, Stan.
Good for them, man.
Good trajectory and engine performance. Booster officer will soon report the shutdown plan to Flight Director Judd Freeling, expected at the 7-minute mark. Integrity, 78 miles in altitude, 460 miles downrange.
Integrity, expect nominal shutdown.
Integrity copies nominal shutdown.
6 minutes 40 seconds of mission elapsed time. Shutdown plan is as expected. Again, the time of MECO was confirmed at 8 minutes 2 seconds into the flight.
Good shit, man. These guys went through so many
7
delays.
minutes of mission elapsed time.
NASA had so many cuts.
Throttling down as we approach the abort once
Good
around
for them.
option. Milestone at the 7-minute 30-second mark.
I think they need
Now 84
Starlink,
miles in
though.
altitude, 650 miles downrange, traveling more than
'Cause their feed
15,000 miles
sucks.
per hour.
Should have used Elon's.
Integrity AOA open.
AOA open.
The window is now open for an abort once around option that would target splashdown in the Pacific Ocean. Still following nominal ascent at this time.
Good for them. How about that? The Americans can still accomplish something.
About 10 seconds remaining until the main engine cutoff of the Space Launch System core stage. Standing by for confirmation of MECO and core stage separation.
All right. Going back to the interview. Give me a second. Sorry for the little break.
Evenly divided state, the second they take power, you can't defend yourself.
Right. Well, but look,
And
this
just to
is
humiliate you, to bring some guy from another country to lecture you about your country where your family was born, you don't have the right to have a gun?
Yep. No, it's such an such an outrage. I mean, it's just like unbelievable. But look, but the thing is that
gonna happen
running
fast
on
when they take over.
unaffordability is winning for them, obviously, because that is the issue right now. They don't understand that unaffordability means price inflation. It means that you've debased your currency, right? And so the thing is now we're handing them this thing to run on
I know.
while Donald Trump is talking about working with the Ayatollah about the Strait of Hormuz or whatever, your local Democrat is going, hey, why are your grocery prices so high? Why is that? By the way, all the price inflation from the Joe Biden, you know the way this stuff works, it's cumulative. So Donald Trump, we live in an inflationary economy because of the central bank. It doesn't matter what
inflation means an inflation of the money supply.
Right, because they will, no matter what, print enough money so that we don't fall into a deflationary, economy. They're gonna do that, and they're not even printing the money. They're just typing into a computer these days, so they can get ahead of it. And so Donald Trump might brag that the CPI is only at 2% and not at 9% where Joe Biden was. But for every regular American, we lived through all of those price increases, and now it's just 2% more expensive than it was under Joe Biden. So you haven't been helped any. The prices aren't going down. They're just going up at a slower rate. It's like, I think it was Michael Malice who had the phrase where he goes, when they go, we cut inflation in half, and they go, it's literally on the level of if you knew somebody who gained 100 pounds in a year and then the next year they gained 50 pounds and they go, I'm getting thinner. And you're like, no, you are not. You are getting fatter, sir. Like, the goal is not to slow down how much weight you put on. But it really does just come down to this, right? Is that we have a government that we cannot afford. We cannot even come close to affording the size of government we have because it's the biggest government in human history. It's the biggest organization in human history, as you often point out. And that organization is parasitical in nature. It gets its money from taking that money, from expropriating that money from the American people. But you can't tax them enough and you can't borrow enough. And so we have to print the money. And so we have to print the money because we can't afford the size of government. And so then that makes the price of everything go up and up and up. And so essentially the point I'm getting at, and this is why I just point out that to say it's Austrian economics because what guys like Mamdani can come in and do now is say, hey, look, everything's so unaffordable. And you know what the answer to that is? A government program.
More control.
More government.
More control.
More government. More
Yeah.
free buses and government supermarkets. And on the surface, that kind of probably sounds reasonable to some people. But the thing is that we're here because government is too big. That's what's got us to this place. And so, I think it's important to just point that out to people, that it's no, this is the thing. The thing is that we cannot afford. Here's the real hard, honest truth that Americans don't want to hear. Or at least maybe the first part they want to hear. People are okay with me saying this. We can't afford the world empire. We can't afford it. We don't have the money for it. We're pretending we have it. We're just devaluing our currency and therefore, by the way, destroying young people's lives. Nowadays, I know a bunch of young people, in my family and friends, who are literally good people, go to work every day, make $70K a year. And they're like, how am I going to settle down and start a family, dude?
Chance.
I mean, the average house around me is going for 800 grand. You make 70 grand a year. That math simply does not work. And this is not, I'm not saying the bum on welfare. I'm saying the young man who's getting up and going to work every day. And we cannot afford.
I get up, I go to work at 3 o'clock in the morning every day. Work 40 hours a week. Make almost 28 an hour, and at the end of the week, between bills, rent, insurance, I'm lucky if I could save $75. Lucky. That is not how it's supposed to be. And it's not because I'm not working hard enough. That's a fucking fact.
This empire. And the other thing is, which no one, including Republicans, ever wants to say, we also can't afford the entitlement programs.
No way.
And they're insane. They're the most indefensible thing in the world. I mean, leaving aside Medicaid for a second, but Social Security and Medicare are from a different time, from a different country, that are totally indefensible. They were indefensible then, but they're really indefensible now.
Disability.
Yeah, you're telling me you have a wealth transfer program from a poorer group to a richer group? I'm sorry, the seniors aren't the ones who need the help right now.
That's for sure.
It's the young people. And I think that I would love if some politician, I think Ron Paul's the only one I've ever seen. I'm sure Massey would agree with me if I said this to him. But I wish somebody would just run on that. On yeah, That's, they used to say that's the third rail of politics. Like, why? Because boomers just need to get everything. Everything has to be rigged in favor of them. I mean, I'm sorry. Like, the thing is, you kind of have these like abstract political debates sometimes, which I'm a nerd for this stuff. I really like them. But so you'd have like you'd have like a Keynesian debate a Chicago school guy, or you'd have a socialist debate a free market guy. And like the free market guy would argue that, there's a better allocation of resources in a free market. And then the socialist would argue that some people fall behind. And so you need redistributive policies to take from the wealthy to give to the people who have fallen behind. But who argues that you should have a redistributive policy from the poor to the rich? That's the whole United States of America. That's all of central banking. That's all of government spending. All it is they take money from the working people and they give it to millionaires. Go look at any of the suburbs of Washington, D.C. None of them make anything. They're all in $3 million houses because government spending is north of $7 trillion.
Of course. Well, that, unfortunately, it's getting to the point where that kind of is our economy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you'd really need to reorder things on the beginning with the foundations.
Yeah. Well,
but two good things are happening. One, the empire is by necessity shrinking. And so that's a cost savings. And that's a reorientation back where the attention belongs, which is here. And two, you have the baby boom going away, which is 1946, 1964. So people born in the middle at 1956 are now 70.
Yeah.
So they'll be 80 in 10 years. So that generation, clearly, I think everyone agrees, not everyone in it, but as a generation destroyed the country.
Oh, yeah. Just the worst.
And annoyed the country.
With some notable exceptions.
Of course.
My mom included. She's cool. But the rest of them.
Oh, many
my mom too.
I know a million baby boomers. Not a million, but I've met baby boomers I like.
Well, I just couldn't. I mean, the thing about it,
not that many though.
There's Jeff Deist is a really, really brilliant guy. He ran the Mises Institute for years. He's over at Monetary Metals now, but he's a really, really brilliant guy.
I have my mom listening to Nick Fuentes. She's pretty cool. She's based now. That's for sure.
This speech one time where he was talking about the boomers and like the evolution of the generation and what they believed at the time. Yep. And it is just the most self-absorbed, selfish generation ever. I mean, their slogan was don't trust anyone over 30 until they turned 30.
Exactly.
And then he does, like, Jeff Deist went through the whole thing. I don't remember all of it, but then by the end, they were the ones pushing COVID. Like, they started out as don't trust anyone over 30, and then they said, shut down the schools so that I don't get sick. Like, take from my grandchildren's generation so that I'm protected. And, yeah, I mean,
but the dumbest, too. I mean, the thing about their narcissism is the core sin. Like, that's their main problem, is they're all about themselves. The thing you notice about people who are all about themselves is how unwise and badly informed they are because they don't pay attention to other people. Therefore, they never learn. Therefore, and I've noticed this since I was a child, because these were my teachers, the baby boom, they'll fall for anything. They're the most easily manipulated people who've ever lived in this country. They are the most dominated by their herd instinct. Like, all the kids are wearing masks. All the kids are taking the shots. All the kids are going into fights. Whatever all the other people are doing, they will do. They're the Mickey Mouse Club generation.
Yeah.
They are truly without creative impulse. They're just not impressive, in addition to being super annoying. One of the least attractive generations. Like, there's a lot about them that the least attached to their own children.
Yeah.
You've got two houses, but your kids have no house. How does that work?
Oh, yeah. The generation of no-fault divorce, the generation of I got to be me, I got to pursue my own happiness when you got little kids.
But you is not that interesting.
Yeah.
But the more you think about you, the dumber you get. That's just what I've just always noticed. That.
It's like one of the most profound ironies in life, like this kind of counterintuitive thing where, like, if you're only concerned with yourself is going to suffer for that. It's really true. Like, and you watch this all the time with people who really have like really bad depression and are just like miserable, and they're constantly talking about their mood today. It's like, hey, step number 1, stop thinking about your mood. Your mood is not that important. Here's step number 1. Start thinking about other people. How about this? Try doing something productive for someone else other than yourself. And don't think about your mood once while you're doing it. I'll tell you, I've been on this earth for about 43 years and I haven't learned that much. I got a few things. I've never been anywhere near as happy since I got married and had kids. Like once my life became about a family and not just about me, you know what I mean? And I think I was in this generation.
Did you expect that?
No, man. I mean, I don't know. I always thought before I met my wife, it was always to me like everything in my mind was like professional success.
Right.
You know, like that was I wanted to be a successful comedian, and I wanted to talk about politics and all of this stuff, and I always wanted that. And you know, it's weird now because I've kind of gotten everything I really wanted in all those years, and it's nice. Don't get me wrong. I really love my career. I love what I do. I love this. I love doing shows with you, and it's great. But like, it's so unimportant compared to family. I mean, you know, like it's just not even. It's not. The older you get, the more you realize it's like that's all that really matters. All that really matters are your wife, your children, the close friends that you have around you, like the good people in your life, connection to other people, connection to God. That's all that really matters in life. All the rest of it is kind of just part of the journey and part of the thing. But
yeah, you do your best, knowing you're probably not going to move the ball that far.
Yeah, well, you know, I read this. There was this really great book by I believe the author's name. I don't know if I've ever actually heard it pronounced. I've just read it, but it's like Jean Twenge or Twenge or something. Right? Yeah. There's now I don't know about her. I think she was on Bill Maher's show recently, and she said one thing that I thought was really stupid, and I turned it off because I was like, I really liked her book. I just don't want to. I don't want to know. You know how you feel? You're like, I don't want to. But she wrote this book called I think it was called The Me Generation. Generation Me, something like that. It was really great. I thought it was a really, really good book. And it was kind of about my generation who was raised by the boomers. And, you know, the way I was raised, and again, I had a really great mother. She was really great and instilled a lot of really good things in me. This was bigger than her. This was just the culture. But we were raised, and I didn't think it was so unique at the time, but I was really kind of a child of the, a child of the unipolar moment, I guess you could say, and then a teenager, young adult.
Post-Berlin Wall.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I remember watching it, watching the Berlin Wall come down. I was at my grandfather's house, and my grandfather, as I told you before, was from Germany. And my only memory of it was I was a little kid. I was born in '83, so I guess I would have been 6 years old when this happened. So I'm a little kid. And I just remember I was being a little kid and probably being loud in the living room or something, or walked in front of the TV. And I remember he snapped at me. I went, shh. And I just remember being like,
how old was your grandfather when he left Germany?
He would have been, I want to say, like 15 maybe.
Oh, wow. Like so old enough to remember.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Old enough to remember some really vicious things. He got out in 1938. But so anyway, so I just remember like, oh, this is really serious to Grandpa, what's happening. And it was the Berlin Wall coming down. Yeah, it was a big deal to him. I'm not sure he liked it that much. I think he was a little concerned about German reunification.
Many were.
You know, as you can imagine. But it turned out to be a good thing. But anyway, so, you know, I kind of grew up in that time, in the 80s and the 90s. And we didn't have things that I think almost every other generation had. Like, we weren't raised with like God, chivalry, nation, country. You know, there wasn't this. It was like you go to school and, you know, get your homework done so no one's mad at you, and then you can go play basketball outside. It was, or there's a new video game out. It was let's hang out with our friends and have fun. There wasn't like this like purpose, you know, like put into your life, which most people have in most of human history, even if it's just
they call it culture.
Yeah, culture, your religious views, you know,
right.
Like, you know, important things. And I think there were a lot of people in my generation were like that. That it was almost like, again, like we said before, you can't take God out of the equation because something else just becomes God. And in a weird, like, I know I've heard you say this before too, but it's so true. It's like the desire to worship is so hardwired into the DNA of the human soul that you just can't. You can say you're an atheist if you want to, but then like, I'll find out what your religion is pretty quickly. And oftentimes it just becomes yourself. You know, when you don't have other things, it becomes like, well, let me have fun. Let me go get this. But that is, like I said, 43 years, I haven't learned much in life. One thing I have learned for certain is that if your highest goal in life is your own pleasure, you will be a miserable, miserable human being.
Yeah, well, I've learned that. I've learned that too. So as you look around at 43, Among people you know who are your age, grew up in the same world you grew up in, how many are thinking about the existence of God right now?
I think a lot more than ever were.
Did you ever know
kids.
any religious people growing up?
Yeah, I mean, I knew some, but it was very few and far between.
Right, me
like
too.
that were really like religious that were talked about it or what. Like I knew. Even like I went to like Hebrew school, but I went for like a year to like my mom wanted me to be bar mitzvahed, but it wasn't really like a deep religious conviction. It was more like, okay, this is what our people have always done, you know, and like out of respect to your father and your father's father and your father's father's father, and like I could kind of understand that. And so I went, but it was like a reformed, temple where I went there. And I remember even the rabbi, like some of the kids would be like, well, do you believe in God? And he's like, yeah,
everything that's good is God and everything,
like it was just total like Jewish, essentially atheism. And
I grew up around so many people like that.
Yeah, so it was just, there was just a lot of that. And I don't, I certainly think that one of the things I really focus on as a father, and I have little kids, but I will focus on this more over the years, is like instilling the idea of purpose, instilling the idea of like God and not just God, but like what that represents, that like, hey, you're here. We're all here in this life together. This life is a little bit of a mystery. We don't know everything about it.
Exactly
but
right.
We do know that like other people exist too, as we exist, and human beings we have this amazing capacity to be demonic or angelic.
Yes.
Like you can really, one person, there's little moments in life where, whatever it is, like you're at the post office and it's 5:01 and you had to get this letter out today or you're getting fired. And you're like, my life is ruined. If you're talking to some person on the other end, can you please just take this one packet? I'm just coming up with a scenario. And that person could go, all right, come here, give me the package. And you're like, you just saved my life. You know what I mean? Like you have no idea what you just did for me. And like, you can do that for other people.
Yeah.
You could try your best to throughout your day and your career and your life, be like, let me help this guy and be that person. Or, you can be what Benjamin Netanyahu is to the Palestinians, like just a monster, the guy who just like ruined their family's life. And so if we're kind of given this world and we don't have all of the answers to it, but we kind of know that we have like an ability to be either one of those things, hey, really focus on being the angel for people. Really focus on trying to help others. And I think that makes you a much happier person the more you focus on that.
I agree with that completely. And do you find that people you knew in the secular world growing up are reaching similar conclusions?
Yeah, I think I know several people like that. And I think that, he had an amazing meteoric rise and a really tragic fall. But I think this is why Jordan Peterson was such a phenomenon for years, that it was like, going around and telling young men that you should search out purpose and search out God in life. It's amazing how like powerful that is.
I love that.
Yeah, me too.
He takes a lot of abuse and, I think he's against me or whatever. I could care less, but I will always appreciate that about Jordan Peterson.
Yeah, me too.
That he did that.
Yeah, I like I in a way he was a guy who I always really wanted to talk to and never did. He was obviously, I mean, him joining the Daily Wire and going on that side was just really, really tragic mistake. And I think he threw away all of the credibility that he had with the younger generation when they really could have used his voice.
Yes, I totally agree with that.
He was never much as a political actor. He was always something else.
No, he's like a Canadian psychologist.
Yeah, like this wasn't,
Sit that part out.
He missed the mark on a lot of his political points, but I mean, when you're on record telling Benjamin Netanyahu to give them hell, that's really hard to come back from. But he came on Joe Rogan's show the episode after I debated Douglas Murray. I believe it was the next one was Jordan Peterson. And I remember watching it and I did feel like I was like, oh man, I think he's going to like say, you know what I mean? Like, I think he's going to say something, nasty about me because he's Ben Shapiro and Netanyahu's guy now. And they just had this big debate. And he didn't. He kind of said, oh, I thought he didn't